1994's TIE Fighter was a highly acclaimed space sim made by developer Totally Games and the sequel to X-Wing. Because it's been so well regarded for so long, it can be easy to forget that following up your game about flying for the heroic Rebel Alliance with one where you fight them as a member of the unambiguously evil Galactic Empire was not an obvious idea. In fact, it would have been downright counterintuitive. But for series creator Larry Holland, it was a long time coming. Before getting into games, Holland spent the first few years of his adult life studying anthropology, a fact to which he credits his unique, at the time, desire to depict both sides of the conflicts in his games.
This is also where my sort of academic background and interest in anthropology really came before, was the idea of designing a game and reliving history from both sides.
True to form, Battlehawks 1942, his first flight sim made in collaboration with LucasArts, featured World War II's Pacific campaign from both the expected perspective of a US pilot, but also that of a Japanese pilot. The sequel, Their Finest Hour, let you play both sides of the Battle of Britain. Thanks to a desire to constantly outdo himself, Holland packed more and more features into each successive game. But there's always a price to pay, and by the time he made it to the third game, Secret Weapons of the Luftwaffe, the cost was too high. In order to get it out in a reasonable time frame, he ended up spending 9 months basically living at his office in one of the earliest recorded instances of video game crunch. For the next game, something had to give, and since that next game happened to be X-Wing, the Imperial side was the obvious thing to cut. But he wasn't dropping it all together, just saving it for later, which brings us back to TIE Fighter. Hi, this is Space Cadet Rewind, a channel dedicated to chronicling the history of the space sim from the perspective of a relative outsider. I've got retrospectives for a bunch of old space sims, including X-Wing, which should make for an interesting companion piece to this one, so maybe check that out after you're done here. Also, maybe check out those like and subscribe buttons. Changes to YouTube's recommendation algorithm over the last year or so have resulted in channels like mine getting a fraction of the impressions they used to get, so I could use all the help I can get. If you want to directly support the creation of videos like this, I've got a Patreon where you could do that as well as influence which games I cover next. So, TIE Fighter, huh? You know, I like to think that, with the eyes of an outsider, I have the ability to see past the veil of nostalgia and reveal these games for what they truly are, and tear down the sacred cows while still giving them credit for what they did right. It's for this reason that I can stand here today and tell you that TIE Fighter is great. Ooh, sorry, wrong footage. Ah, that's better. Okay, well, big surprise, right? It turns out the reason why people talk about this game with such hushed tones and put it in all those best of all time lists is that it really is an all-timer. Who knew? But why is it so good? Well, to hazard a guess, I'd say it's because it was made with hindsight. TIE Fighter benefited immensely from being cut in half. It's interesting looking back at the response to my X-Wing video. A lot of people came by with helpful advice highlighting features I missed. Except, I didn't miss them, they weren't there, until a later game added them. This is a very iterative series, building on the same engine dating all the way back to Battlehawks, and X-Wing released over 30 years ago, so the confusion is understandable. Others had a bit more of a knee-jerk reaction, calling me a whiner. Which is funny, because you know who agreed with nearly all of my criticisms? Totally Games themselves, given the improvements they made to TIE Fighter and its sequels. Others still viewed X-Wing even more critically than I had. Perhaps best summed up by Rob Wilson, aka the vidIQ guy, wondering aloud why I even bothered with X-Wing when TIE Fighter was right there. Well, it's because I find it fascinating to witness the evolution of a series over time and wouldn't want to deprive myself or my viewers of that opportunity. If we really want to be thorough here, and we do, the experience doesn't start when you launch the game, but when you open the box and see that the game comes with a free novella called the Stele Chronicles, which details the life and circumstances that led the player character to where they are at the start of the game. The name Merrick Stele doesn't appear anywhere in the actual game, but it's widely agreed that if we have to settle on a canon name for the pilot who flew these missions, it's this guy. Merrick is a teen boy trying to make the best of a very bad situation. In the Thrawn system, two small worlds engage in a decades-long conquest. Few people bother to recite the original causes of the war. It simply exists, ravaging the cities and the countryside. The economies of both Kuon and Bordal are in ruins, their people living under martial law. Systems like Thrawn are ripe for conquest, ready to welcome the iron hand of the Empire. We meet Merrick as he pulls off a totally sick stunt with his swoop hoverbike, but as he returns to the swoop meet to collect his winnings, his hopes are dashed when he realizes it's being raided by the local authorities, so he has no choice but to return home empty-handed. When he arrives, his mother informs him that the raid was broadcast on the news, including footage of his stunt, which Merrick thinks is fireballs and totally beam. But his mother continues that the broadcast featured his name, his real name. It turns out this is really bad, like time to skip town tomorrow morning bad, because Merrick's father was a big shot scientist for Kuon up until he was captured by the Bordali, and the rest of his family would serve as excellent leverage. It's even worse than they thought, because within the hour, a team of spies shows up to kidnap them. His mom puts up a pretty good effort to try to get them out of there, but they're eventually outfoxed and end up as prisoners on a shuttle to Bordal. The journey is cut short, however, when the ship is caught in a tractor beam and everyone on board is led onto the deck of the Imperial Star Destroyer Vengeance. After spending some time in a holding cell, Merrick is brought to an amphitheater alongside many other people, including important figures from both Kuon and Bordal, and given a presentation. The Republic was corrupt, yada yada yada. But then a strong-willed, uncompromising man by the name of Palpatine appeared, and you know how it goes. Long story short, your old lives and the war are over, which is good in a way, but you now work for the Empire whether you like it or not. Months later, Merrick finds himself as a mechanic on that same Star Destroyer working on the ties. He takes an Interceptor he had just repaired out for a test flight, a privilege the techs are unofficially allowed when things are looking quiet. But things don't stay quiet. He receives a radio message about an emergency. Merrick's not supposed to answer it because he's a tech, not a pilot, but nobody else does, so he eventually responds. The person on the radio says something about a shuttle on the far side of the planet, then "we'll be back," and the Vengeance is gone. On the other side of the planet, he finds a shuttle being attacked by X-Wings and Y-Wings, and, well, he doesn't miraculously defeat them all, actually, but he does keep them distracted long enough for the Vengeance to return, saving the shuttle. And wouldn't you know it, the person on board that shuttle was an admiral, one Admiral Morden to be specific, who was grateful and impressed enough by Merrick's exploits to send him off to pilot training. The Stele Chronicles is surprisingly well written. I was genuinely impressed with the prose, particularly the way it leaned into all the subtle and not so subtle ways the Empire projects power, which ultimately end up seducing Merrick. For a while, I was sucked into the world and just enjoying myself, until he picks up this tablet and we get a weirdly verbose transcription of its contents, at which point my interest cratered. Yeah, nice try, Ruzel Demaria. You're not getting me with edutainment, even if it is teaching a video game. I'd much rather just play the game. And TIE Fighter has just the thing for me. A tutorial. That's a pretty big deal, actually. A big problem with X-Wing was the significant amount of homework you had to do in the form of reading the manual and memorizing the keys before you could even get started. X-Wing seems to have been made under the assumption that its appeal would be limited to the cross-section between flight sim fans and Star Wars fans. Receiving what must have been an overwhelming amount of feedback to their hint lines from beleaguered Star Wars fans who wanted to know why they kept running out of laser power must have opened their eyes to the plight of the much larger audience they didn't even know they were serving.
One of the biggest feedbacks we've gotten, besides people were excited about it, was the difficulty level, and we would have, like we're doing with TIE Fighter, addressing a lot of those issues so it's more accessible to people. There's a lot more levels, essentially levels of difficulty setting, and allow people who are intimidated by flight sims and the complication of flight sims and are more Star Wars fanatics than flight sim people, that give them an easier road into the product.
It's worth noting that nothing about Holland's vision had to be compromised. All of the mechanics from X-Wing are still present, only now you can learn about them by playing the game. The tutorials themselves are a bit fragile. Your instructor warns you at the beginning that any deviation from the script could break the whole thing. But as long as you keep that in mind and take them seriously, the tutorial missions should get you in fighting shape with minimal fuss. I can forgive a little awkwardness considering that these tutorials are among the first of their kind. There was a period in which I was beginning to suspect that TIE Fighter might actually be the first game to feature an interactive tutorial, until I happened to play Dynamite Headdy, which had one a year earlier in 1993. If you know of a game that instructs you on its mechanics or controls, then gives you a chance to practice them and gives you feedback on the result from earlier than that, I'd love to hear about it. For as important and ubiquitous as they are, tutorials seem to be surprisingly understudied. Did Treasure invent the interactive tutorial? As of now, all signs point to maybe. This training mission, the very first one teaching you how to target and shoot things in a TIE fighter, has a special surprise at the end. Once you've destroyed some stationary targets, it has some moving ones to practice on, and once you dispatch those, you're done. You can move on. But if you want to test your mettle, you can keep going and take on one that shoots back, and then two that shoot back, then three, and it just keeps escalating from there. If you think you're hot stuff, you might find yourself coming back here again and again to see if you can take on what is probably the toughest challenge this game has to offer. There's a similar kind of thing in another training mission for one of the more advanced ships, but that one's more of a test of your patience and sanity than your skills. This is the one that'll put hair on your chest. How ironic that this footage of the very first time I played this game was the best I was ever able to do at it. So, flying a TIE fighter. That's what it's all about, right? The twin ion engine fighter, characterized by its unique shape, surprisingly eco-friendly solar panel wings, and small size, but perhaps most importantly, its lack of amenities in the name of cutting costs and maintaining that small size. No hyperdrive, no life support, no shield generator. So what's it like to fly then? Well, as someone who can now talk about himself as a seasoned X-Wing pilot, the first point of contrast that comes to mind is the vulnerability. When you're flying a shielded ship, you can get complacent. It's fine, just dump some more power in there, nothing to worry about. You cannot get away with that in a TIE fighter. One hit, and you're likely to be looking at damage to at least one of your essential systems. Another, and you're probably dead. To pilot a TIE is to be a bundle of nerves. You have to be in order to survive. Above all, it means avoiding the kinds of risks you're probably used to taking in other space sims. If it would solve all your problems, but maybe put you in the line of fire, it's not a viable maneuver, lest one stray shot force you to do everything all over again. Of course, there are those rare moments when you have no choice but to put yourself in the line of fire. Those are the real nail-biters. It's not all bad, though. Not having a shield generator may be bad for your health, but it does mean that you don't have to manage a shield generator. One thing I criticized X-Wing for was the way it threw you into the deep end with its power management system, creating an awkward learning curve. TIE Fighter does make you deal with power management right from the beginning, but it starts you off simpler with only 2 meters, lasers and engines, no third bar, no shunting power, and no shield polarity to worry about. How fortuitous that what's left is also the most intuitive part of the system. If you need ammo, put some power into lasers. If you need to go faster, take some out. Simple. And once you've gotten used to that, it can be used as a stepping stone to the complete system. Another issue that would be rearing its ugly head at about this time in X-Wing is the unreasonably wide spacing between the X-Wing's laser cannons, making the prospect of actually hitting a TIE an awkward exercise in frustration. Later games in the series would solve this problem with a feature called laser convergence, which would automatically aim your lasers inwards so they'd converge on the center of your crosshairs after traveling the distance it would take to get to your target, but that was after TIE Fighter. It's not a problem at all though, because the boys at Sinar Fleet Systems were smart enough to put both of the lasers nice and close to each other right in the middle of the ship, so they're just inherently accurate. How thoughtful of them. While we're admiring the crosshairs, check out these rectangles at the top. They weren't there before. These are known as the Outside Threat Indicator Array, which sounds complicated, but all it really means is that these rectangles will light up if someone's trying to shoot you. The left if it's a fighter, the middle if it's a capital ship, and the right if someone's trying to lock on for a missile attack. In a shieldless TIE, this is your lifeline. If any of these light up, you need to get gone immediately. You might wonder how they managed to make a game about flying a TIE fighter that doesn't devolve into a frustrating mess. Well, part of it is that you eventually get better ships, but the other part is stuff like this. It might not seem like it at first glance, but they always make sure you have the tools you need to succeed. Our partner in this dance is the Z-95 Headhunter. It's like an X-Wing, except it sucks. It wasn't created for this game, which was surprising to me, because in the immortal words of some Star Wars character or another, if there were not a Z-95 Headhunter, it would be necessary to invent it. They can't just have X-Wings be the basic enemy type. They may be given equal billing on the boxes, but this is not a fair fight. 1-to-1, the X-Wing outclasses the TIE Fighter in every way that matters. TIEs are sometimes depicted as having a speed or maneuverability advantage, but not so much in this series. The tech room lists them as having the same top speed, but in reality the X-Wing has more power to dump into its engines, making it effectively the faster ship. Enter the humble Z-95 Headhunter. Envisioned as a predecessor to the X-Wing in Brian Daley's novel Han Solo at Star's End, the Z-95 was probably a pretty good ship in its heyday, but nowadays it's not looking so hot. It's slow and weak, as a fodder ship should be. It does at least have shields, making it tougher than the TIE Fighter, but barely. All of this comes together to make the perfect mook to blow away in the early parts of this game. Or so you think. For whatever reason, the Z-95 is largely absent from the first battle, leaving Y-Wings and shuttles as your primary enemies instead. It's quite odd. Once you're confident that you can fly a TIE fighter, it's time to graduate to the real thing. Instead of tours of duty, they call them battles now, and each one has less missions in it, coming in at 5 or 6 a pop, but there are more of them to compensate, totaling up to 7 battles. And that's just the base game. Much like its predecessor, you got your money's worth with TIE Fighter, no doubt. Battle 1 takes place in the immediate aftermath of The Empire Strikes Back. The rebels have once again been scattered to the winds after the discovery of their base on Hoth, and as a new pilot in the Imperial Navy, we are part of the effort to catch the stragglers before they can regroup.
One TIE fighter from Alpha, Beta, and Gamma squadrons will be out on patrol around Outpost D-34. Your mission is to inspect all cargo-carrying vessels as they pass by our station. We are on the lookout for rebel forces that are fleeing from their base on Hoth.
The perfect job for an Imperial lackey. Players of X-Wing will recognize the familiar mission map overview, which was all you got in that game. In what has quickly become a trend, TIE Fighter has a bit more help to offer. For every mission, you can ask your commanding officer 3 questions. What are we doing here? What'll I be flying? And what are we up against? Some of this information can be gleaned from the mission map briefing, but it's delivered in such a way that it can easily wash right over you, so having access to the Cliff Notes version is nice. I gotta say, it was bold of them to start the first mission with you on a collision course with Outpost D-34. It reminds me of the Kingsfield series, which is infamous for this kind of thing. Except even in those games, you at least have to press a button to move forward to your death. In TIE Fighter, you have to seize the controls and veer off immediately if you want to live. Better have that stick ready. Much like the beginning of the original game, this mission requires little to no involvement from the player, so even if you skip the tutorial, you still get a chance to stretch your space legs. It's interesting that the one thing you are responsible for is scanning these freighters and transports. The scanning mechanic led to some frustration for me in X-Wing, largely due to the lack of a proper explanation of how it actually works. I can't accurately judge how things would have gone if I had to learn about it by playing this game, because I'm already burdened with the curse of knowledge, but while the wording of their explanation still isn't great, they do give you a training mission dedicated to letting you feel out how it works for yourself in a low-pressure environment, which is something I had to do on my own time in X-Wing. So it's probably fine. Fly within a certain distance of a ship, which varies based on the size of the ship while targeting it, and you will automatically scan that ship, allowing you to see what kind of cargo it's carrying on your targeting display. And lo and behold, one of the freighters is trying to smuggle some Hoth refugees out of the system. Once you've scanned all of the targets, further participation is technically optional, but should you want to, you can help defend the capture operation from some rebel shuttles that warp in, then inspect another wave of different kinds of freighters and transports, including some YT-1300s, aka the base model of the Millennium Falcon. There's a lot of new ships in this game in addition to all the old ones, making for a nice bit of variety.
After interrogating the rebel prisoners captured aboard the Muugari freighter, we are sure that the rebels plan to launch an assault on this outpost. You must hold off the attacking forces until help arrives from the Imperial-class Star Destroyer Hammer.
But before we launch, there's a suspicious-looking guy here. Sir, are you seeing this?
I am a special envoy of the Emperor. In this time of crisis, political intrigue and open rebellion, the Emperor requires special means of communication with his loyal forces. In the battles ahead, I will ensure that his wishes reach those like yourself who have pledged their fealty to him. You will have many opportunities to serve the Emperor and will be rewarded for your efforts. In the mission ahead, locate the rebel officers who are fleeing from Hoth in a stolen Imperial shuttle. We have forces standing by who will attempt to disable and capture this shuttle once you have located it.
So, not all mission objectives are mandatory now. We actually saw this in action in the first mission, but it was a little weird because we hadn't met this guy yet, who is the face of the mechanic. On most, but not all missions, he'll be waiting for us in his little alcove, ready to tell us to scan something. That's usually what he wants. Whatever it is, it'll show up as a secondary mission objective in your goals list, which, by the way, actually exists as a thing you can refer to while flying a mission now, which is huge. As an added bonus, if you fail a mission objective, it'll actually tell you right away now. Not having an itemized list of your objectives or real-time updates on their status in X-Wing could be unbelievably frustrating. So much so that some people literally didn't believe me, but no, I assure you, I would not have put up with that crap if I didn't have to. And this little slice of modernity is very much welcome. I see the secondary objectives themselves as a test to determine how on top of things you are. Sure, you could defend the outpost from these Y and X-Wings trying to launch torpedoes at it, but can you do it with enough time to spare to go out and scan this shuttle when it shows up? The answer is, probably. If you're capable of defending the outpost, it's not that much more of an ask to ID the shuttle. Later missions do get harder, but I never found the secondary objectives to be anything other than a completely reasonable little layer of added challenge. And if you find yourself struggling to meet the bare minimum, the option to just move on is there too. But if, on the other hand, you do want an unreasonable layer of added challenge, TIE Fighter has you covered. For all the sickos out there, bonus objectives are here for you. No joke, I genuinely believe this feature is one of the most important reasons for TIE Fighter's success. Not because of people actually using it, but because it allowed the mission designers to get their jollies without ruining their output the way they did in X-Wing. In that game, the missions could devolve into absolute bullshit, with mission objectives that practically required rote memorization of the mission script so you could be at the right place at the right time to deal with threats that literally warp in out of nowhere to ruin your day in seconds. TIE Fighter still has this kind of design, but only if you really want it. It's been made more optional than optional. Completing all the secondary objectives for a mission will earn you praise and a little extra insight into the story.
The rebel officers you have located will prove useful to our cause. From them we will learn the whereabouts of other rebel terrorists.
Completing all the bonus objectives gets you points and a medal. This appropriately establishes bonus objectives as something that only those who want to wring every last bit of value out of the game should seriously pursue, while the rest of us can just get on with our lives. Everyone is happy.
We have traced the arms used in the recent attack on Outpost D-34 to a Muugari cargo loading area in the Tundra sector. We suspect that the Muugari are providing arms and other aid to the rebels. Destroy everything. Take no prisoners.
Just who are the Muugari? Good question. They were invented for this game, and the only things it gives us to go on is that they're assisting the rebels by selling them weapons, which puts them in pretty good company, and that they're not particularly well off since they're stuck using old ships like Y-Wings to defend themselves. Although they did manage to make it into the official Star Wars encyclopedia, they were never used in an actual story after TIE Fighter, and no one ever thought to draw one, so that's about all we get. Anyway, we gotta blow up their stuff. This is the first of, thankfully, not that many missions which ask us to fly a TIE bomber. The TIE bomber is... well, even if you didn't already know, the name is pretty self-explanatory. It sucks. The thing about bombers is that they're typically a lot bigger and less maneuverable than a fighter, so they can carry all those bombs. And the TIE bomber is no exception, with a significantly lower speed, wider turn radius, and larger hurt box. However, bombers typically have much heavier armor than fighters, making them tougher to take down, and this goes double in sci-fi settings where they tend to get some pretty hefty shields as well. Unfortunately, the TIE bomber is an exception in this case. No shields for you. While you do get a relative boost in HP compared to a fighter, we're talking 4 dual link to hits to kill instead of 2. Put all that together and you've got a flying death trap. I think I even commented on how bombers were much easier to take down than fighters in my X-Wing video. Now I know how those poor suckers felt. It's not so bad in this mission, of course, since it's still early going, so all of our targets are transports and shuttles, with only equally sluggish Y-Wings to defend them, and you've got plenty of wingmates to hide behind. Although the briefing officer said we'd be loaded up with torpedoes, we actually get to choose which kind of ordnance we bring, which is due to the series. If I wanted to, I could have brought concussion missiles to use on the Y-Wings. I mean, I wouldn't ever want to do that, because in order to lock on, you have to hold your crosshairs over your target for a significant amount of time while they try to stay out of them, which just makes me wonder if I couldn't have taken them out with lasers in that time. Larger prey like transports and capital ships, which can be targeted from farther away, lack the ability to evade your crosshairs or juke a missile, and have enough HP to discourage laser use, change the calculation a bit, which is where torpedoes come in. Or at least, they would come in if it weren't for the existence of heavy rockets, which deal 3.5 times as much damage and are exactly as overpowered as that sounds. The trade-off is supposed to be that they have worse flight speed and tracking than the torpedoes, but that hardly matters against the big and beefy targets it makes the most sense to use a missile on, and what they do have is more than enough to get the job done. You also get less of them, but the extra damage more than makes up for that. We're not there yet, but if you launch a double load of these at a Corvette, that thing is gone. It's ridiculous. There's also heavy bombs, which do even more damage, but their tracking and lack of propulsion is bad enough to actually be a problem, making them a massive pain in the ass to use, so you're almost always better off going with the rockets. It's a pretty safe bet that picking the rockets anytime you're given the choice will make that mission significantly easier than it otherwise would have been, which kind of undermines the system a bit. You do very occasionally come across the odd niche situation where a different type of ordnance would be better, but that actually makes things worse. Much of the time, picking heavy rockets can trivialize the mission, but then you'll run into situations where you get halfway through a mission only to realize that you need something else, but you had no way of knowing that beforehand, so you just have to start over. As much as I appreciate the sentiment, I think we'd probably be better off if they had just chosen for us. Of course, they could have just balanced the warheads better, but that would still leave the problem of finding out too late that you made the wrong choice. Interestingly, for whatever reason, you don't get the ordnance screen while playing missions in the simulator, so if you use it to replay a mission that would have let you choose, you're instead stuck with the default loadout. And yeah, things are a bit more balanced that way.
During our attack on the Muugari rebel weapons area, the rebels launched a raid on outpost D-34. It fell to the rebels despite a valiant fight. Our objective for this mission is to retake the outpost, recovering as much stolen material as we can. You will be flying the TIE Interceptor designated Alpha 1.
There isn't much to say about the TIE Interceptor. It's like a TIE fighter, but better. Faster, more maneuverable, slightly tougher, and with 4 guns. Typically, the advantage of having 4 guns in this series is that you get more power to shunt into your shields, but the Interceptor doesn't have shields, so you get more reserve ammo? Quad linking your lasers is helpful when fighting evasive targets that don't give you many opportunities to get a clean shot. But yeah, flying one is a pretty similar experience. The other notable thing about this mission is the introduction of escort shuttles, equipped with rear turrets. The old stick a gun on the back trick is a great way to discourage people from getting behind you. For a shielded ship, this is merely an annoyance. You might have to break off to recharge every once in a while. For an unshielded ship, such as our TIE Interceptor, taking on these things is tantamount to suicide. Normally, behind the enemy is the only safe place to be. When even that's no longer safe, we're in big trouble. Thankfully, there are plenty of other targets for them to shoot, and we fight them right at the start of the mission, so we can quickly retry if something goes wrong. I've been dutifully scanning all the things the Emperor wants me to scan, and it looks like somebody noticed.
Prepare to join the secret order of the Emperor.
This doesn't actually affect anything, so players who don't do the secondary objectives aren't missing out on anything, except for this sick tattoo. And you can book another session to add on to it if you rank up with the secret order. And if that's not worth doing, then I don't know how to finish this sentence. Doing that involves TIE Fighter's annoyingly opaque, but not so bad once you see the data mined values scoring system. Basically, doing secondary and bonus objectives gets you points which go towards ranking up in the order. Real simple if they had just explained it. There's also the boring normie progression track, which all points from completing primary objectives and scoring kills goes toward. You get more or less points depending on which difficulty you're playing on, but if you play the game on normal difficulty like I did, you will most likely end up attaining the maximum rank of General before the end of the base game without even having to think about it. They still won't let me pick which ship to fly though.
The rebel attack on outpost D-34 was launched from a rebel cruiser in the Bruani sector. We have located its exact position and are launching an attack to destroy it. You will fly in the first wave to clear away the cruiser's starfighter shield, paving the way for a second wave of assault gunboats. These gunboats will lead the direct assault on the cruiser.
You know what would be really funny is if they went and captured the outpost again while we were out doing this. They didn't, but they should have. Anyway, the notable thing about this mission is that they're giving us an assault gunboat for it. First seen in X-Wing, the gunboat is technically better than a Y-Wing. That's probably the closest point of comparison. Like the Y-Wing, it has ion cannons which can be used to disable enemy ships, and expanded warhead capacity. And also like the Y-Wing, it's slow as hell, albeit slightly less so. Most importantly though, it has shields. Give a man dying of thirst a half-empty glass of water and he won't look twice at it. I guess it's true what they say, you don't know what you got till it's gone. Hearing this shield impact sound effect instead of that sickening crunch whenever I get hit is sweet music to my ears, let me tell you. Due to the gunboat's sluggishness, it's often advisable to turn your shield generator all the way off to give yourself more engine power, which counterintuitively doesn't mean going without shields. You can use the energy from your lasers instead, which somehow works better and is what you should be doing anyway. You just have to do it a lot more often this way, which is annoying, but not as annoying as trying to fight a ship that can outrun you. This mission is also our introduction to the famously overpowered B-Wing, but we're flying against it. It's only OP in the hands of a player though, so taking them on in this game is not too dissimilar from fighting a Y-Wing or a gunboat.
Our last attack rendered the rebel cruiser Lulsla vulnerable for a direct attack using torpedoes. Transports Sigma and Omega have been chosen for the honor of destroying the rebel cruiser. Assault gunboat groups Tau and Nu will provide close escort for the attacking transports.
This final mission for the first battle is actually kind of tough because it involves clearing out a dense field of laser turret mines while rebel fighters constantly warp in to harass you. On top of everything else, there's a new type of mine called a Type C, which launches a missile when destroyed. However, as long as you use dual or quad-linked lasers to do the job, the missile will usually be taken out by whichever bolt didn't hit the mine, so they're not too bad. By the way, if you're wondering what happened to Type B, they're just like the old Type A's, only they shoot ions instead of lasers. Ions travel slower than lasers and do less damage to shields, so they're less of a threat to us, but can very quickly disable any unshielded craft regardless of how much hull strength they have, making them very dangerous to any capital ship that happens upon them. They're extremely rare, and I'm not even sure they appear in the base campaign at all, so don't worry about it. The transports are way too gung-ho about
the honor of destroying the rebel cruiser,
and might get themselves killed before you can clear the way for them. You could probably order them to wait, but then they'd likely get picked off by the rebel fighters. This is a situation where the new Call for Reinforcements button might come in handy. If a mission-critical ship gets destroyed, you could now ask for a second wave, which could cut down on the frustration one might experience by quite a bit. The only penalty is that it docks some points from your score, if you care about that. And as we come to the end of the first battle, I gotta say, that was pretty good. Things got a little spicy at the end there, but to an appropriate level for the climax of an episode. There's a degree of intentionality here that simply didn't exist in X-Wing, where the difficulty of each mission seemed to be chosen via dartboard, and some of the most infamously difficult and frustrating missions appeared in the first tour of duty. You can't do rising and falling action in a video game if you don't have a handle on difficulty in the first place.
I have come with an offer for the rebellion.
We have little reason to trust you, Admiral Harkov, but we are willing to hear your offer.
The fleet under my command is willing to join the Rebel Alliance for a price.
Very interesting, Admiral. We have great need for officers of your caliber. Here is what I propose.
Ooh, intrigue. We'll have to put that on hold for a bit though, as Battle 2 takes us on a seemingly unrelated detour. Early previews of the game talked about a system that would let you choose between different stations to serve on, each with their own progression track, allowing you to shop around if you got stuck on a particular mission. This system seems to have been streamlined, because what made it to the final game is presented pretty similarly to Tours of Duty in X-Wing. However, you can play the first 4 battles in any order you want, and even swap between them without losing your place in each one. This brings an element of non-linearity to the game, but it also means that nothing that happens in any of these battles can rely on anything that happens in the other three, so get ready for some lateral story progression.
We have received a distress signal from a Ripperbless convoy under attack by Demok marauders. The Seepan peoples have been torn apart by civil war for generations. Each of the rival factions, the Ripperbless and the Demoks, is guilty of committing atrocities against the other. Admiral Harkov has been given the task of bringing an end to this civil war. Your objective is to save as much of the Ripperbless convoy as possible. The Demoks are to be driven off, not annihilated, so be sure to let some of them escape. Those that escape will report back to their leaders. They will realize the Empire means to end this war.
Do as your commander orders, but pay attention to everything around you. Inspect the cargo contents of the convoy if you get the opportunity. Admiral Harkov's performance so far has not been all the Emperor had hoped for. Conflicting reports give us reason to believe everything is not as it seems in this civil war.
The Seepans are another TIE fighter original, with little to no information about them other than that they're at war with themselves, despite being the narrative focus of an entire battle. But we at least get some art depicting them. Sort of. They look human to me, but who knows? Those pixels could be hiding anything. Another difference between X-Wing and TIE Fighter is the addition of mid-mission dialogue, but it's been pretty sparse and boilerplate so far. Battle 2 represents a notable increase in the frequency and narrative relevance of this dialogue.
Attention all Ripperbless and Demok craft. This is Imperial space. You are hereby ordered to stand down or face the consequences.
Imperials, our Demok forces are seizing illegal ore supply. We cannot permit the Ripperbless craft to escape. Don't interfere, Imperials, or you will be fired upon.
It still lacks emotional impact because I don't know who these guys are or what their deal is, but the cold darkness of space at least feels a bit less lonely now. Battle 2 also steps up the use of mission objectives to tell a story. They've always at least reflected the story in that they represented whatever the briefing had to say playing out in front of you, but they were completely static, lacking any drama or intrigue. It would have been difficult or impossible to implement a mid-mission twist without the use of mid-mission dialogue to convey that information to the player, and that's just what we see here, provided we complete the secondary objective.
Alpha 2, thank you for inspecting the convoy. These craft must be impounded. You may assist transport Epsilon.
Target destroyed.
Alpha 2 has discovered Imperial weapons in the Ripperbless.
Target destroyed.
Transport Epsilon has been dispatched. Ripperbless convoy, surrender your vessel for inspection.
It's a pretty marginal expression of the concept, but it's still nice to see, and it demonstrates that there's significant potential here.
The Seepan Civil War threatens to break out in full fury. The Ripperbless are angered by the Demok's previous raid on their supply convoy. They are seeking revenge by attacking a Demok space installation. The Empire's goal is to prevent this conflict from mushrooming and spilling over into neighboring star systems. Therefore, Imperial forces must stop either side from gaining the advantage. To this end, you will help drive off the attacking Ripperbless forces before they can do too much damage to the Demok space station. When they've taken sufficient losses, they will withdraw.
This is another TIE Bomber mission, and it occurred to me while playing it that the TIE Bomber carries a disappointingly low number of warheads for something that is supposed to be a dedicated bomber. Yet another reason why it sucks. But not to worry if you run out before the mission ends, which is something that might happen if you chose torpedoes instead of heavy rockets. They've got you covered with another new mechanic, rearmament. On some missions, such as this one, there will be a ship waiting to resupply you after you've spent all your ordnance. All you have to do is press the handy-dandy resupply button and they'll fly over to you.
You may reload torpedoes by having tug combat utility vehicle L11F5.
Though you should keep in mind that they have to physically fly over to you, and they tend to not be the fastest ships in the world, so it's best to find them and close the distance yourself before initiating the process. There are actually a few different kinds of ships that can do rearming duty depending on the mission, and their speeds can vary. This mission gives us the absolute worst case scenario in the tug, which moves so slowly that it can appear to not be moving at all. In this case, you're better off flying directly into it. A maneuver that still fills me with terror over the prospect of running afoul of the game's extremely primitive collision detection system, but they foresaw this and disabled collision between you and the rearmament craft during the process. Still makes my adrenaline spike every time though.
Your mission is to provide safe asylum to some Ripperbless refugees fleeing from the Seepan Civil War. They are principally scientists who are weary of the way their knowledge has been put to use. They have stolen a system patrol craft and a couple of Lambda-class shuttles. The system patrol craft isn't hyperdrive capable, so it will have to dock with the Protector to transfer the refugees. The shuttles can be accommodated in our hangar.
I actually failed this mission several times, despite it not being all that hard. The cause? They hand you a TIE Interceptor, a very fast ship, and ask you to hunt down a bunch of very slow Y-Wings and shuttles. Hilarity ensues. Crashing into things was a big problem for me in X-Wing, and it's still a problem here, but less so. One of the big contributors to crashes in X-Wing was the massive spread on the thing's idiotically designed laser cannons that you had to use against a lot of tiny TIE fighters, leading to situations where you might have trouble hitting them despite having them dead on in your crosshairs and have to unexpectedly veer off after failing to hit them.
Only Imperial stormtroopers are so precise.
This is basically never an issue in TIE Fighter due to the Imperial ships tending to have much more accurate lasers and the larger size of most of your targets. Easily the most obnoxious way to crash was to successfully destroy your target only to have their chassis eject straight back into you, killing you instantly. Crashes like this are still theoretically possible because ships do still break apart and the pieces do have collision, but the chance that they'll fly straight backwards seems to have been greatly reduced, which is greatly appreciated. The crash scenario that does still happen is the rear end special. Picture this, you're flying a fast ship, like, say, a TIE Interceptor, and you're tasked with protecting something from hostile shuttles. You'll accelerate to intercept, then set your throttle to match speed with them as you close in. However, over 5 seconds later, you're still overtaking them. You veer off at the last second, but your target has the same idea, and you collide. Although both of you are moving at nearly the same speed at this point, your ship is inexplicably destroyed. Many such cases. The X-Wing series has two idiosyncrasies that lead to this kind of thing. First, the extremely primitive collision detection system. Here is how it worked in X-Wing based on my observation. If two ships try to occupy the same space, whichever one the game deems smaller is destroyed, and the larger one takes damage based on the size of the smaller one. Force equals mass, basically. It has come to my attention that there are a number of fans of the way that game handles collisions specifically, even going so far as to disparage other games with less lethal collisions, which bewilders me. If you're watching, I hate to break it to you, but that is not how physics works. There's this whole other variable called acceleration, which is pretty important to the equation. It does not make any sense for ships moving this close to the same speed in the same direction to cause any significant damage to each other. My best guess as to why it's like this is that it's a result of the engine going back to Battlehawk's 1942. When making a game about terrestrial planes, I can sort of see the logic for skimping on the physics, because you can reasonably assume that they'll always be traveling at lethal speeds, otherwise they'd fall out of the sky. Meanwhile, a game like Wing Commander was built from the ground up to simulate space, where that assumption doesn't hold true, and so a physics engine that takes acceleration into account and was capable of resolving collisions without deleting one of the colliders was a given. Thankfully, they did improve on this in TIE Fighter, where in X-Wing any collision, no matter how minor, would result in the destruction of at least one of the participants in my experience. It's now possible to have a non-lethal collision as long as the ship you're colliding with is roughly the same size as yours. So if, for example, your gunboat experiences a low-speed collision with a Y-wing, both craft will only suffer minor damage to their shields, so you could dust yourself off, exchange insurance information, and be on your way. And this is great! It's exactly what I was asking for, at least as far as that specific set of circumstances goes. The problem is that things still break down when you go beyond that particular situation. For example, if you move at a walking pace into a stationary cargo container, your craft will still violently explode just like it did in X-Wing. Or say if your Interceptor rear-ends a shuttle. What this suggests to me is that Totally Games recognized that there was a problem and did what they could to address it, but stopped short of fixing the fundamental issue, because that might have required them to rip the physics engine out and create a totally new one from scratch, and they weren't willing to do that. The other contributing factor is the excessively sluggish acceleration and deceleration. This is something I talked about in my X-Wing video, but I think I failed to impress upon everyone just how excessive it actually is. It takes 15 seconds for an X-Wing to slow to a stop from its max speed. Think about that for a second. Or 15. Nah, I wouldn't do that to you. But the point is, when talking about slamming on the brakes, that's an eternity. And before you ask, the amount of power going to your engines has no effect on acceleration or deceleration speed. Believe me, I tested all of this. Many people suggested the problem was my choice of input device, but it's funny, much like with laser linking, everybody seems to have their own idea about what works best. Some insist on a joystick throttle, which isn't officially supported in most versions of the game, but is very nice if you can mod it in. Others use the keyboard, and even more swear by the match speed with target button, which also doesn't exist in most versions of X-Wing, but does in all versions of TIE Fighter, by the way. The thing is, I think people are missing the forest for the trees. It's really not that important what method you're using to set your speed when that's going to be a drop in the bucket next to the ocean of time it takes for your ship to actually make it happen. This sluggishness is, as far as I can tell, unique to the X-Wing series. None of the other space sims I've played, and I've gone through quite a few at this point, saddle you with a ship this unresponsive. It goes against my instincts from decades of playing video games. When I work the controls, I expect the ship to follow through on them in a timely manner, and when it doesn't, I always feel surprised, even though I know intellectually why it's happening. It's interesting to note that in the sequels to this game, the acceleration and deceleration rate of the ships were made way faster, making them much more agile and forgiving to fly. I don't think anybody complained. The collision still sucks, though.
Intel has discovered the time and place for a high-level meeting between the Demok and Republic leaders. Capture the leadership of both sides in the Sepan Civil War. They will be vulnerable to capture during a deep space rendezvous near Sepan 8. Their shuttlecraft are to be disabled, then boarded by stormtrooper transports.
It looks like the Demok and Republic are trying to negotiate peace without involving the Empire. And we can't have that now, can we? Here at the second-to-last mission in the second battle, we finally see our first real Z-95 headhunters. Better late than never, right? Speaking of which, I never really talked about the controls in depth in my X-Wing video. They're pretty much identical in this game with one major exception, so better late than never, right? Anyway, the controls. There are 3 ways to play TIE Fighter, starting from that most desperate of fallback methods, the keyboard. As I often find myself saying, this genre was made for analog-style sticks, so a digital method of control... Oh, my mistake. See, that's the exception. There were 3 ways to play X-Wing, but only 2 ways to play TIE Fighter, because they completely removed keyboard flight. By 1994, the computer mouse was well on its way to becoming the ubiquitous accessory it is today, so perhaps they considered it a mercy killing. Nonetheless, some people did prefer to play that way, and considering that the mouse controls are not without issue, I think this was a mistake. So, the mouse controls. Unlike Wing Commander's virtual joystick system, referred to by some games as relative mouse control, the X-Wing series uses absolute mouse control, or in other words, you move the mouse to turn directly, just like a first-person shooter. I've heard some people extol the virtues of this method of control, calling it overpowered, and indeed, when the enemy is on screen and not actively moving off of it, you can enjoy the unbeatable precision of the mouse. However, as soon as the enemy moves off screen, you will start to see the problem. Unlike a first-person shooter, you can't just set your sensitivity. Your ship can only turn so fast. It's a game balance thing. Some ships turn faster than others. But more than that, this is a vehicle simulation game, and the complexities of having a turn radius are inherent to the operation of a vehicle. But it's even worse than that. In a first-person shooter, your foes usually don't have the free space to run circles around you across 2 axes. Not even that one, because there are walls in the way. When an enemy in open space is actively trying to get behind you, you end up having to pick up the mouse and put it back down again and pick it back up and again and again and again to the point of absurdity. In the comments for my X-Wing video, people told stories about how they wrecked their mouse and hurt their arms playing that game, and yeah, I can see how that might happen. That's not something I could ever see myself putting up with, so I don't consider this style of mouse control viable as a result. And so we're left with... And what can I say? It's excellent. It feels much smoother to control than the DOS version of Wing Commander 2, with what feels like a smaller dead zone and more gradations to work with besides. So alright, TIE Fighter was made for sticks, but what kind of stick will you use? Big stick? Small stick? Hands-on throttle and stick? Obviously the game was made for a full-size flight stick, so there's no issues there. In my Privateer video, I used TIE Fighter's support of joystick throttles as an example of how far behind the times that game was, but that was actually an error. TIE Fighter, at least the DOS versions of it, does not have any out-of-the-box support for throttles. That doesn't mean people didn't find a way to do it anyway, but it was with the use of a mod. A program called Joy.com, which would hook into the game and translate the throttle's input into the appropriate key presses to manage your throttle in 1/3 increments. I actually couldn't find any information about who made this or where it came from, so if you were around at the time and happen to know, by all means leave a comment. Just like X-Wing, TIE Fighter is very gamepad friendly provided you design a good layout for it. The input resolution is high enough that I could definitely feel the difference in precision between a thumbstick and a full-size one, but it was nothing disqualifying. The hard part, with this series specifically, was always predicting where you needed to shoot to hit your target, not going through the motions to execute on it. While I do ultimately prefer playing this game with a full-size stick, there is one aspect where the gamepad has an advantage, which is having all the controls at my fingertips. Any other method requires you to deal with the keyboard layout, which is the single aspect of the game that has aged the most. That's because pretty much any PC game that came out in, let's say, the last 25 years has a much more efficiently designed control scheme. That's due to the influence of Thresh, aka Dennis Fong. Thresh was a professional Quake player, something he was very good at, but his advantage wasn't just down to raw skill, he also used and advocated for a custom control scheme that put the game's movement keys on WASD. This allowed him to cluster all the other important functions on the keys around it so he could play without ever having to move his hand off of that position. Players and game designers listened because the benefits were inarguable. Now it's standard practice to design keyboard layouts with a default position in mind, like home row for touch typists, with all the most common or timing dependent actions within easy reach. TIE Fighter's layout was not designed with this kind of efficiency in mind. Instead, priority was given to making each letter key correspond to the first letter of its associated function, which helps a little with intuitiveness, but not enough to be worth it. I just find having to travel all over the keyboard to perform basic actions to be a huge pain in the ass compared to what I'm used to. Now, can I live with it? Sure, but I don't have to like it.
Both sides of the Seapan Civil War have now determined that the Empire is their common enemy. Accordingly, they've decided to put aside their differences and join together to drive us out. There is, of course, no possibility of their succeeding.
We did it! We ended the Seapan Civil War! Oh, but I guess this is the wrong kind of peace. Time to go to war. For peace!
Your objective is to ensure that Admiral Harkov's flagship, the Victory-class Star Destroyer Protector, receives new TIE Advanced to replace the TIE fighters and interceptors we've lost during this operation. The escort carrier Tropsabor is to rendezvous with us shortly.
Ah, yes, the classic tease. We know this one well from our time with Wing Commander. And just to really drive the point home, they bust us all the way down to the basic TIE fighter. It's nice to want things, you know? The briefing officer is happy to remind us that we can always pretend to fly an Avenger in the simulator if we want to.
Since the TIE Advanced is ready for frontline service, it would be wise of you to brush up on your skills for this craft in the combat chamber.
It'll help build the anticipation. Ooh, I can't wait. Because our objective is to protect the assault carrier until it finishes doing its job, we might find ourselves with nothing to do after destroying all of the attackers, and given that it takes a whopping 15 minutes to do the job, it might be a while. This kind of situation, where you have to just sit there twiddling your thumbs for multiple minutes at a time while some other ships take their sweet-ass time to dock with each other, was quite common in X-Wing. I was not happy about this. It's easily my biggest issue with that game. Thankfully, TIE Fighter has a solution to this problem. With the touch of a button, you can now accelerate time by 2, 3, or 4 times speed, which in situations like this is a godsend. It's not perfect. The process is completely manual, so you have to be very careful about using it, lest you get obliterated by hyperspeed X-Wings. They could have made it so that it turns off if a hostile craft enters the system, which is an event that shows up in your log, but it does the job, and I'm just glad it's here at all. Tragically, this feature was not backported to X-Wing Collector's CD or Collector's Series, where it could have been a real game changer. Shame. While I'm very happy this feature is here, the thing that really blows me away is that it's almost unnecessary. Up until this point, I never even thought about using it. Because they are superficially similar, it's easy to underestimate the difference between the mission design in X-Wing and that of TIE Fighter. Looking at them side by side really lays bare how, well, barren the missions in X-Wing were. Yes, they often gave you multiple different objectives in each mission, but they were almost always beholden to a precise but inscrutable sequence. Everything had to be done in the exact same way, in the exact same order, one at a time, and woe betide you if you finish anything early. TIE Fighter's missions, by contrast, tend to utilize multiple overlapping objectives that interact with each other in interesting ways. You're given far more slack in terms of how timely you have to be to complete these objectives, but in exchange, you have to take on the responsibility of juggling them. This results in not only a far greater sense of freedom in terms of how you complete each mission, but turbocharges the pacing, constantly giving you things to do or think about, so that there's almost never a dull moment. Scripted docking wasn't the only source of dead time in X-Wing. There was also the travel time between engagements, which could get a little long. This is still the case in TIE Fighter, but because there's now so much going on all the time, I actually kind of appreciate the opportunity to take a breath, collect my thoughts, and cycle through the targets to see what's going on. Although the two games came out only a year apart, playing the missions feels like you've been warped a decade ahead.
Alpha 2, stick to your mission profile, please. Your curiosity is going to cause you serious trouble someday.
Wow, a personal message from the Admiral Harkov himself? I'm honored. I can't help but feel like all this intrigue would have hit a little harder if they hadn't shown him meeting with Mon Mothma. Kinda spoils the surprise, don't you think?
The civil war that has ravaged your planets is over. It is time to lay down your arms. Join us to rebuild all that was destroyed in this savage conflict. Even now, the process of repairing your planets has begun.
Ah, yes, a message of peace. I feel at peace, don't you? With the Seepin Civil War concluded, Battle 3 turns our attention to the Pakuni system, where we're tasked with supporting the construction of a new Imperial base.
At the cargo transfer area near the planet Argoon, we plan to pick up the equipment and material needed for the construction of a new space installation in the Outer Rim territories. This area has been mysteriously abandoned. We suspect the rebels are up to something here. Our main goal is to make sure the right equipment is found and loaded onto the Victory-class Star Destroyer Stalwart. We can then deal with whatever the rebels may have in store for us. Therefore, inspect all the containers in the area, looking for station assembly material.
Alright, a reconnaissance mission, for which they've given us a TIE bomber. Whatever, it still gets the job done, just a lot less quickly. It's also completely unable to outrun the A-Wing they send to hunt you down at the very end of the mission, even with max engine power. Now that's a dick move right there. I feel like we should take a moment to talk about this guy. There are a number of characters with speaking roles in this game, but most of them only have a few lines. Going purely by volume, he accounts for probably at least 90% of the spoken lines in the game, effectively making him the voice of TIE Fighter. But who is he, really? Unfortunately, we don't ever encounter him outside the context of him briefing or debriefing us for a mission, and the credits don't bother naming him, leaving him as Briefing Officer. I think he deserves better than that. Maybe I'm just still healing from the wounds of serving under Akbar, who clearly doesn't care whether the pilots serving under him live or die, but I really appreciate someone who actually does appear to care. He smiles at the thought of crushing rebel scum and grimaces over Imperial lives lost when delivering an after-action report. He always makes sure you have the full context and know what to expect when going into a mission. When you fail, he's there to pick you back up and offer helpful advice. A lot of this is really just the game being a lot more helpful to the player than its predecessor, but the briefing officer serves as the vehicle through which much of this extra help is delivered, making him an all-around likable guy. His voice is that of British actor Guy Siner, best known for his work on Allo Allo, a sitcom about the owner of a cafe in a small town in occupied France during World War II, and as Siner tells it, the voice director had auditioned every voice in San Francisco without success, but after heading to Los Angeles, where he happened to be living at the time, as soon as she heard his regular speaking voice, she knew she had the right man for the job, and I tend to agree. Siner absolutely nails the part. He delivers just the right amount of that trademark British officiousness that cuts to the heart of what those officers in the movies were all about, without going overboard. He still sounds like he cares, you know? Case in point, the Sith priest had a sore throat today, so the briefing officer covered for him by throwing his voice.
Good work. The heavy lifters successfully loaded the base equipment onto the Star Destroyer Stalwart. We now have all the equipment needed for the new base's construction.
What a stand-up guy. Siner continued to play the role of the nameless Imperial officer in multiple Star Wars games, going all the way up to Jedi Outcast. The party was bored to play, I guess.
Vice Admiral Thrawn has been given the duty of ridding the Outer Rim territories of pirates and smugglers. One of the bases they have been using is an outpost in the Pakuni system. Your task is to lead the assault on this base and to destroy the Corellian corvettes that are protecting it. This base must be systematically and completely destroyed, so that a new Imperial facility may be constructed in its place.
We're stuck in a TIE bomber again, but at least the mission is appropriate for it this time. The mention of Vice Admiral Thrawn would have raised some eyebrows back in the day. Okay, he was in the intro, but you know what I mean, his presence in the game. At the turn of the 90s, George Lucas was taking a break from Star Wars. He hadn't even begun to lay the groundwork for the Star Wars prequels, a process which itself wouldn't even begin to bear fruit until almost a decade later. At the time, the prospect of actually getting a sequel to the original trilogy seemed so far off as to be inconceivable. So, when novelist Timothy Zahn came along with a sequel trilogy of books meant to be as ambitious as the films were, he was welcomed with open arms, and his Heir to the Empire trilogy ended up making quite a splash. Characters and concepts from the novels were picked up by other pieces of media, forming a loose web of canonization that would eventually be called the Star Wars Expanded Universe. One early adopter of this trend was the X-Wing series, starting slow with elements like the capital planet of the Empire, Coruscant, which is, you may be surprised to learn, as I was, an invention of Zahn's. Or was it...
Coruscant.
To be fair to Dodonna here, this may have been the very first time anyone said the word out loud in an official piece of Star Wars media. Maybe we've all been saying it wrong all this time. Only Zahn knows for sure. TIE Fighter stepped it up with the inclusion of the titular heir to the Empire himself, Grand Admiral Thrawn. Or Vice Admiral. This is before the events of the books, so he's got a few promotions to go. To be honest, not having experienced any of the media featuring the character other than this game, I don't really have a good sense of what kind of a guy we're dealing with here. And unfortunately, my experience with TIE Fighter was of basically no help in that regard. I get the idea from his title and mannerisms that he's supposed to be this super smart Napoleon-esque grand strategist, so presumably there's something more impressive he could have been doing than overseeing the construction of a base in some pirate-infested backwater system. Yes, splendid. Construction of the gamer chair is proceeding exactly as planned. You there, make sure the cup holder is calibrated precisely to the dimensions of a Mountain Dew can.
Yes, sir.
Just when those foolish rebels think they've caught me thirsty, I'll give them an emergency. Code Red. Thrawn's representation in the base game barely rises above the level of a cheap cameo, though I'm sure people at the time were just happy to see him animated and voiced. I understand he figures more heavily into the expansion content, so maybe he does something interesting there.
The pirates' outpost in the Pakuni system was destroyed during our last engagement. We have orders to defend our position and wait for the convoy carrying the new space installation. We expect that the modified frigate Ludwig will come under attack from the rebels and pirates operating here.
If you take heavy rockets and use them well, it's possible to destroy the enemy frigate with your TIE Fighter, which is a hell of a matchup. How do they fit the rockets on a TIE? I find it wise not to ask such questions. Regardless of what happens to the enemy frigate, our primary concern in this mission is protecting our own frigate from torpedo attacks. This is an objective type that X-Wing relied upon heavily, but TIE Fighter cooled off on it a bit, and for good reason. It's the same reason enemy capital ships are so vulnerable to our own warheads. You can launch them from really far away, and while it is technically possible to intercept them, their small size and extreme speed makes achieving such a feat with any regularity an impractical thing to ask for. Stopping a group of TIE bombers that launch from a capital ship you can see is one thing, but shielded fighters that can come from anywhere? Not a chance. The rebels were always going to win this war if you think about it too much. But yeah, defending a ship from torpedo attacks is simply an awkward proposition due to the way they work in this series. So when TIE Fighter does ask you to do it, I'm happy to report that they employ the classic game design technique of just knowing your weaknesses. If you don't have the means to make something good, you can at least have the decency to make it easy, and that's what they've done here. Both of the frigates in this mission are actually modified frigates, which are even tougher than the regular one, and the regular one was already a pretty hefty ship. What this means for us is that the Ludwig can take a lot of punishment. The rebels throw a lot at it, but as long as we can stop a couple launches, it's fine.
Construction on the new space installation NL-1 is proceeding well. It is nearing completion, and all systems are operational except the shields, which are functioning at only 50% of their normal level. The final work will be finished shortly. You are to defend the area around the new station and the Ludwig, driving off any rebel attack. They have yet to concede this area of space to Imperial control.
This is pretty much the same as the last one, except now we're defending the half-built station itself and we get a gunboat to do it, which I'm always happy to take over a shieldless TIE. Intercepting enough of the attackers might be hard if you don't know to just turn off your shield generator, but is pretty trivial if you do. I guess you're supposed to use your missiles on these modified corvettes, but our allies seem to have that covered pretty well on their own.
The rebel corvettes have been destroyed. Good teamwork.
Well, okay. Good work, guys. I'll just be over here, doing my own thing then. As befitting of a game where you fly for the vast and all-consuming galactic empire, you're pretty much always surrounded by plenty of allied ships. The effectiveness of friendly AI can be a tough thing to balance. Make them useless and their presence can be a force multiplier for the player's frustration and an immersion breaker as you wonder just how the hell anything gets done when you're not around. Make them too good and you risk robbing the player of their starring role, which is why most games err towards the former. On medium difficulty, TIE Fighter usually finds a pretty good balance. Usually. The AI at least appears to be basically competent while still leaving the player plenty to do. One notable change is the removal of friendly fire damage from the AI. We still have to watch where we're shooting, but we'll never have to worry about getting shredded by the turrets of the Star Destroyer we just launched out of. Getting shot up by your trigger-happy wingmate was bad enough when you always had access to shields. Now that we don't, and there are that many more guns around all the time, the decision must have made itself. Given the amount of green lasers I've seen coming my way, I can't say I disagree.
As our construction on the NL-1 station nears completion, Vice Admiral Thrawn wishes to conduct a formal inspection of the facility. Be prepared to escort his transport from the Stalwart to the station. When Vice Admiral Thrawn has completed his inspection, we will require you to escort him back to his Star Destroyer.
We're once again flying a TIE bomber in a mission unsuited to it. But they at least came up with an excuse for it this time.
Almost all of our TIE fighters and interceptors are out of service and undergoing maintenance repairs at this time. We have no choice but to use the TIE bomber in a defensive role, something it was not designed to do. If and when combat occurs, you'll need all your starfighter savvy to hold your own.
Plus they've given us some new toys to play with.
Fortunately, your craft will be specially equipped with a double load of 16 advanced concussion missiles. These brand new missiles are faster, have better homing capability and carry a larger warhead than the standard concussion missiles.
He doesn't mention it, but we also get access to advanced proton torpedoes if we so choose. They're still not quite on the level of heavy rockets, but this upgrade brings them significantly closer while still maintaining the versatility advantage that occasionally still comes in handy. Unfortunately, we don't always get access to advanced warheads from this point. Whether we get them or not seems to be chosen arbitrarily on a mission-by-mission basis, which, given that heavy rockets are always available, seems questionable. In this one instance, the concussion missiles actually are the best choice, because the rebels attack using a variety of small craft, like they do, including an opening A-wing offensive, which a TIE bomber would otherwise have a lot of trouble chasing down. The missiles also benefit more from the advanced glow-up, getting double attack power as opposed to the torpedo's 50% increase.
The construction of Station NL-1 is complete. Final preparations are being made to make the outpost fully operational. Vice Admiral Thrawn's Star Destroyer Stalwart has just completed delivery of 2 IPV-1 system patrol craft. These high-speed craft will be used to monitor and inspect vessels passing through this sector. The Victory-class Star Destroyer Stalwart will depart shortly to escort the final convoy to this station. During its absence, you will fly Space Combat Patrol to protect against rebel attacks on the station. The rebels and their pirate allies continue to attack this region of space fiercely. Protect the station and the 2 new patrol craft against enemy attack.
The finale is just the same old protect the station song and dance we've been doing this whole time, only at a larger, more bombastic scale because the rebels are throwing everything they have left at us. We have a gunboat this time though, so if anything I found this to be easier than the missions leading up to it. You know, we're a little over halfway through the game at this point. By this time in X-Wing, I was ranting and raving like a lunatic about wave systems and endless gunboats and amorphous TIE fighters. To be fair, the missions I was dealing with would have been enough to drive anyone crazy. That is not the case at all in TIE Fighter, so it's probably worth delving into why that is. To cut a long story short, the primary issue I had with X-Wing's mission design is that it often left me feeling less like an ace pilot and more like a professional QA tester. Essential information about your objectives was often not communicated to the player via briefings or otherwise. Important enemy craft that could sink your mission if left undisturbed were often unassumingly hidden amongst nigh endless waves of identical looking fodder. So how are you supposed to puzzle out how to locate these mission-critical enemies within the context of the mission? Well, that's the neat part. You don't.
This sort of other aspect of the battle was really the situational awareness and being able to assess what's going on and what I should do right now. And that required you to assess not just your state, but the state of the battle and what is close, where are your friends, where are your enemies, and who's in trouble, who needs to get to attack now because they're going to attack somebody else, etc. So sort of sorting out that whole situational awareness, frankly, in X-Wing, we did a very poor job on because we hadn't sort of figured out that we needed to provide the user with some more options and ways to quickly figure out, who's attacking me and target him so I can figure out where he is, so I can turn the tables on him.
On the other end, missions were often extremely vulnerable to exploits. With only a little knowledge of how the mission scripting system worked, you could break things wide open. Thinking like an X-Wing pilot would get you nowhere, but memorizing who does what and then starting the mission over, that does the trick. Opening up a mission editor to see who has what orders works even better. The game did everything to encourage cheese tactics and nothing but punish you for taking it at face value. The expansion packs added a hint system, which they couched as spoilers, and I can see why. Scroll through target list to 2nd Corvette and fire 6 torpedoes at it. Target 1st Corvette and fire 4 torpedoes at it. Then switch to ions and disable it. 2 more Corvettes and Gunboat Mu, 3 ships, will enter 12 seconds after the destruction of the 1st Corvette, so destroy it last. Very helpful, but is that really the kind of behavior you want to encourage in your players? By contrast, TIE Fighter missions feel like they were designed to reward you for thinking like a TIE Fighter pilot. Firstly, mid-mission dialogue plays a part. If something particularly important is going on, your commanding officer will often just tell you about it.
Rebel transports are aiming for the patrol craft. Protect them.
Which helps. Another way they do it is to just cool it with the nigh-infinite enemy reinforcements. While many enemy groups come in multiple waves, I never feel like I'm drowning in a sea of fodder the way I did in X-Wing. Even though there's way more going on pretty much all the time, all of it feels a lot more purposeful, which makes it easier to figure out what's going on at a glance. When a group of Y-Wings jump in, it's obvious they'll be up to no good, but when some X-Wings show up later on, I'm at least a little suspicious. And for those situations where you're unsure, they included a hell of a feature for clearing that up. The threat display, accessible at any time by pressing the Z key, shows you various information about your current target, including, most crucially, their current goal and how far they are from completing it. They just tell you. You don't have to fail the mission and memorize it. You don't have to crack open the mission editor or read a guide. You could just read it right there on the screen. That they would do this in light of X-Wing's insufferable vagueness feels crazy. Now, could there have been a less contrived way to deliver this information than a computer that somehow magically knows what the enemy is thinking? Probably. But in the absence of a better way, I really appreciate their willingness to just give it away. The threat display isn't the only improvement they've made to the tools for gaining situational awareness. In X-Wing, I kinda treated the issue of divining what a given mission wants from you and gaining general awareness of what's going on around you as separate things, but as this game demonstrates, those are one and the same. Even the basic target display has been improved, where before it only gave you vague messages about the status of your target, like shields didn't. It now just tells you how much shields, hull, and system strength your target has in percentage form. They've upgraded the often useful Select Nearest Enemy Fighter button to the always useful Select Nearest Attacker button. Before, it would arbitrarily exclude craft like shuttles or transports because they technically aren't fighters, even though they're often used as if they are. Now it's guaranteed to lock on to the nearest hostile, no matter what it is. It's even smart enough to exclude disabled enemy craft because despite their hostile intentions, all they can do is think mean thoughts about you, so they're not really relevant to the battle. They've also given us a couple other new tools, such as a button to target the last ship to have entered the system and a button to target the nearest enemy intending to attack your current target, which is something I think I might have specifically asked for. Despite that, I actually didn't find either of these to be very useful in practice. The former because it's not specific enough, and the latter because going out of my way to target a friendly ship and press a button to see what's targeting them is just a bit too involved to bother with in the middle of a battle. Mostly it's that battles are orderly enough that you rarely if ever need to go to those lengths to make sense of them. Still nice to have these tools in your back pocket just in case. And for those rare do-or-die moments where you really need to sort through the noise as quickly as possible, you get something even more powerful, the map. There was a map in X-Wing, but I didn't even bother mentioning it because it wasn't useful at all. The game was paused while you looked at it, so you theoretically had infinite time to make sense of the battlefield, but good luck actually doing so. It tried to represent a three-dimensional battlefield in 2D and lacked any ways to help you relate what was on it to the actual in-game situation, making it very hard to do so. The new map has a 3D mode, allowing you to rotate to get a better view of what's going on. You're also able to select targets using the same keys you'd use to do so in-game, and crucially, when you return to the game, the target you selected on the map will be your target. I didn't really make use of this at all during my playthrough because taking myself out of the game to do it didn't seem fun and it just wasn't necessary, but it is an undeniably powerful tool should the need arise. Finally, the hint system from the X-Wing expansions returns as advice from the briefing officer and Sith priest if you fail a mission. It's pretty funny to hear advice like,
target the modular conveyors at the start of the mission and inspect them first. Your flight leader will keep the Demox busy. When Transport Epsilon is launched, target it and save it in your target memory. Use the A key to quickly determine when it is under attack. Then intercept any attackers. You may assist Epsilon by reducing the shields of the modular conveyors. When the escort shuttles arrive, be careful. They are tough to kill, so fly evasively and don't get too close.
Acted out in character. Like they're reading you the game facts guide to your life.
How are the repairs proceeding?
Damage caused by the rebel attack is almost repaired.
Excellent. I want this installation fully operational within the hour.
Yes, sir. We will be prepared for any further rebel attack.
While Battle 3 certainly wasn't bad, I can't help but feel like we're starting to spin our wheels a bit. After being given even a tiny taste of what integrating story into the missions can do, going back to missions mostly devoid of meaningful context or drama feels a bit disappointing. Hopefully the next battle will change that.
Admiral Zarin has been entrusted with overseeing TIE starfighter development by Emperor Palpatine and Lord Vader. The R&D facility he commands has been completing the design of the production version of the TIE Advanced. This latest TIE starfighter is derived from Lord Vader's specially modified TIE fighter. Zarin's scientists had hoped to perfect a hyperdrive engine that could be added to the TIE Advanced. However, they have not found a design that is reliable and small enough to be installed on a TIE craft. A breakthrough has been achieved by a group of scientists working for the Habeen and the Narwak. Admiral Zarin has negotiated to get demonstration versions of the new hyperdrive technology to evaluate. The Habeen and Narwhal are located in the Outer Rim territories on Mylok 4 and are currently not members of the Empire. Your mission is to escort the Habeen convoy of 4 cargo ferries to a rendezvous with Zarin's ship.
Ah yes, back to teasing us with the cool new ship. Well, at least this is an attempt to play on my emotions, even if it's a reheated one. Battle 4 presents itself up front as yet another conflict with pirates, but we quickly learn that it's all about the TIE Advanced, so there's at least something to look forward to. This mission is the first one in the game to have what I consider to be truly challenging objectives. There are multiple, but they all boil down to the singular responsibility of protecting the ships involved in a cargo transfer. There are Z-95s to distract us, but the real concern is these Y-Wings trying to launch torpedoes at the transports. I've gone over why the dynamics of torpedo combat greatly favors the attackers, but the gist is that we get very little time to stop this from happening. You get a bit of slack in that only half of each group needs to survive, but given how quickly the torpedoes shred through them, that's still not much. You really gotta be quick about destroying or distracting those Y-Wings, and maybe even a little lucky, or perhaps precognizant to be in the right position to intercept some of the torpedoes. And if you manage that, another wave of Y-Wings appears, and then another, and it goes on like this for a while. Extreme difficulty, singular objectives, and wave after wave of the same ship? It almost seems like a throwback to X-Wing, doesn't it? Well, you know what? It's fine. They can have one. Just one is a novelty, as long as they don't make a habit of it. Plus, you get a nice bit of payback.
The Narwhal are incensed that the Habeen are willing to sell their jointly developed technology to the Empire. They have defied all attempts at peaceful negotiation and have recently threatened to sell the hyperdrive technology to the Rebellion. The rebels could use this technology to upgrade their existing fleet of hyperdrive-capable craft. We cannot let this technology be sold to the rebels. Therefore, in this mission, we are launching an attack on the Narwhal base, where the technology is being stored. Destroy all cargo-carrying vessels. Let no ship escape.
This one's almost trivial, over in 5 minutes. Attackers have the advantage, see? There's not a lot going on here other than combat, so let's talk about the combat and how it evolves throughout the game, which is to say, not all that much. In X-Wing, I observed that while Imperial pilots were pretty good at juking your shots, even the best of the best still weren't any good at shooting you or getting behind you, which are, you know, pretty important to dogfighting. I am nonplussed to report that both Rebel and Imperial defector pilots are much the same. It's actually worse in this game, if you can believe it. The one thing the Imperials could rely on in a straight-up fight was strength in numbers. If there were enough of them all around you, evading them became increasingly difficult. The Rebels don't benefit from this as much as you would think, thanks to a new system that only allows a certain number of enemy ships to fire on you at a time. The justification for this is that they're practicing discipline to avoid hitting each other. There is some truth to this. Having everybody shooting at once in a hectic free-for-all would lead to copious friendly fire incidents, but it does also mean that their ability to overwhelm you with numbers is severely curtailed. The fact that a player of average skill can take on hordes of rebels in an inferior, shieldless craft and come home victorious again and again is ample proof that the AI is just not very good at dogfighting. So, does this mean that the game is boring or easy? No, not really. It just means that for this series, at least so far, combat is more of a means to an end than an end in itself. As mentioned, the one thing they genuinely are good at is staying out of your crosshairs, aka wasting your time. And in this series, you're always on the clock. If they can buy enough time to run the clock down and you fail a mission objective, they've won. Or if they get close enough that you panic and try to rush the objective without dealing with them, that's how they score most of their kills. So combat on its own is not the most engaging activity in the world, but in the context of the mission, it's still fun and challenging. I kinda wish it could be both, but for now, it'll do.
You are to stop an onslaught of Narwhal Y-Wings from destroying the Habeen research outpost before it can be evacuated. Imperial intelligence has learned that in retaliation for our attack on their base, the Nawak are planning to launch a reprisal raid on the Habeen Technology Research Center. Transport Runner and 2 Imperial shuttles will rescue the base personnel. If the containers are destroyed before all 3 rescue craft have docked, you have failed in your mission.
And we're once again in a TIE bomber protecting a cargo transfer from Y-Wings, only now it's a bit front-loaded, with a huge initial wave of them already launching torpedoes right as we arrive. This one's so dead simple, it's almost more like Wing Commander. Succeed or fail, it's all over in less than 5 minutes, so it really doesn't matter what it is. But, as with all of the missions in this battle, you probably will fail a couple times, so let's get into what that entails. Just like in X-Wing, if your ship is destroyed, what happens next depends on whether your auto-ejection system was damaged or not. If it was, you die, and get a funeral where they vaporize your hover coffin. Fancy. In the more likely event that you do eject, you'll either be rescued or captured depending on the affiliation of whatever ship was closest to you. Yep, that's how it worked all along. Doesn't really make sense, as if they'd have the time to pick you up in the middle of a fight, but I guess they gotta decide what happened somehow. If you get captured, the rebels take you to a prison on this weird dinosaur planet, which is fun.
Prisoners, move into the building now.
Either way, your life as a pilot is over. And it just automatically loads your save from before the mission started. You don't even lose your points. I wasn't really opposed to X-Wing's system because the only thing at stake was your points. But I didn't really care about the points because the prospect of keeping your pilot alive through a whole campaign didn't seem very fair or fun, so I'm not really sad to see it go either. What's really interesting though is what happens if you get rescued. If you left any mission objectives failed or incomplete, then you get debriefed on your failed mission as if you had left the mission by any other means. This is how it worked in X-Wing as well. However, if you're rescued after having completed all of the mission's objectives, well, in X-Wing that would be the same as having failed the mission, but in TIE Fighter they pose the question. If the mission was completed and you survived, why couldn't you just move on with your life? And you do. Brilliant. I mean, it makes sense, right? I wish more games would play with the margins between success and failure like this. The only contemporary example that comes to mind is Helldivers 2, which counts the mission as completed even if your entire squad dies, or conversely, you could escape with some resources even if you fail the primary objective. More nuance like that is always welcome in my books.
Admiral Zarin's negotiations with the Habeen have reached a pivotal point. All the business terms of the technology transfer deal have been hammered out. Only the formal signing of the agreement and the recognition of the Habeen and their full rights as Imperial citizens remain to be finalized. The Empire and the Habeen will rendezvous to seal this deal. You will patrol the rendezvous site, protecting the Seamus and the Habeen from any last-ditch attack from the Nawak.
Now that we're finally out of the TIE bomber, it's time to take on some capital ships. It's no big deal though. The 4 heavy rockets an Interceptor can somehow carry are enough to take out both corvettes, and then it's back to our daily dose of protecting things from Y-Wings. Ooh, that rhymes. Yeah, not a lot to talk about, as usual with this battle. So, how about that music, huh? Smooth. Longtime viewers may remember that I was not a fan of X-Wing's much-touted dynamic soundtrack, finding it extremely repetitive and grating in its repetitiveness. Experiencing TIE Fighter and doing a little digging into how its music actually works has only put that dislike further into context. While it was a slick production with the way it so seamlessly stitched together all sorts of different musical stings to match what was happening on screen, the vast majority of its dynamic elements were just that, very short musical stings, which would quickly feed back into one of 3 core themes, one of which you almost never got to hear, which would then be looped ad nauseum. Like X-Wing, TIE Fighter uses the famous for not being famous iMuse system to deliver a dynamic soundtrack, but I think TIE Fighter makes much better use of it. There are new Imperial-themed versions of all those same stings for things like friendly or enemy craft arriving, scoring a kill, losing a friendly, and so on, which is all fine and dandy. However, what they've done, crucially, is add some variety to the core looping themes. We now have three different themes that can play when you're idle, depending on whether there's nobody around, there are neutral ships nearby, or enemies. Not to mention, due to the improved mission design, you're not listening to them a disproportionate amount of the time. The combat music was similarly improved. In addition to the standard theme, there are panic and climax variations, reminiscent in concept to Wing Commander's intense combat and critical damage. And that's all good, but is it great? Not really. The soundtrack is downright listenable compared to X-Wing, but it's not much more than that. What they've done here is really the absolute bare minimum. It no longer makes me want to hit the self-destruct, but they could do better than that. How about different idle themes depending on what kind of mission we're doing, like in Wing Commander? How about different battle themes for the different factions we fight? They could have done a lot more here, and I wish they had. It's all the more frustrating when you look at the soundtrack to the menus, which they really went above and beyond the Call of Duty for. Just like in X-Wing, every room gets its own track, but the Ready Room gets 4. It's got one for when you're just chillin', which, to be fair, is shared with the main hall, but then you go to the map screen and that has its own theme. Then you start talking to the briefing officer and that has its own theme. Then you talk to the Sith priest, and you guessed it, he's got a theme too. Or take the training pod and combat chamber, which each have their own unique track that you will never hear more than a few seconds of unless you sit in them without choosing a mission for the sole purpose of rocking out, which you very well might do because these are some pretty catchy jams. And that's all fantastic, but where was this energy when it came to the in-flight music? If they were gonna go this hard, I'd prefer they do it there, where I spend the majority of my time. But, well, I suppose I should just be happy for the improvements we did get.
Imperial intelligence reports that the Nawak are trying to follow through with their threat to hand over their version of the hyperdrive technology to the rebels. This cannot be allowed. You will join in on the attack on the rebel forces that are loading equipment from the Nawak. We must destroy rebel frigate Xerxes.
We're the attackers this time, so it's once again trivially easy. Our actual job is supposed to be clearing out the fighters to support the TIE bombers, but there's nothing stopping you from just blasting the cap ships yourself and going home in about a minute flat. Either way you go about it, success is basically guaranteed. Maybe I should turn the difficulty up to hard. Okay, not really, but hey, difficulty settings. They're new to the series. You can choose between easy, medium, and hard from the options menu, accessible anytime you're at the concourse. The fact that you can change the difficulty mid-campaign is a really forward-thinking quality of life feature. It's ubiquitous now, but at the time of this game, it was practically unheard of. Usually if you wanted to change the difficulty, you had to start a new game. As for what the difficulty settings actually do, it's unclear. I am fairly certain that they don't do anything to change the fundamental physics or game rules, no damage multipliers or things like that. There are some theories going around, such as adjustments to the pilot skill levels of your enemies and allies, but it's all based on subjective determinations. Just to play it safe, I'm not going to assume any more than can be gleaned from the one objective measure that we do have, which is what we can see with the mission editor. And with Yogami, at least that's how I choose to pronounce it, we can see that mission designers could flag a group of ships to appear or not appear on any given difficulty. Not only can this be used to add or remove groups, but we can often see examples of groups that are removed from one skill level but replaced with a similar one with, say, a different pilot skill level, number of craft, or number of waves of reinforcements. Take Y-Wing Grey here. On Easy, they've got a skill level of Officer and some torpedoes. Bump it up to Medium, and not only are they an ace, but now there are 2 of them.
This is getting out of hand.
But that's nothing. Go to Hard and they're top aces. And they have a double load of advanced torpedoes. And they've multiplied again.
Now this is pod racing.
This allows for a lot of flexibility in terms of implementing difficulty settings, so if you told me these per mission changes were the only difference between the settings, well, I'd believe it. There's just one problem with this setup, which is that it relies on the individual mission designers to implement the difficulty changes, and not all of them took the assignment equally seriously. There are missions with tons of changes between all 3 levels, some with maybe a token group removed for easy, and even some with no difficulty related changes at all. Regardless, it's nice to see them try to accommodate players of different skill levels.
Welcome, Lord Vader. Let us show you the improvements we've made to the TIE Advanced.
The Emperor is very interested in your progress, Admiral Zarin. Hyperspace capability. Impressive.
The first TIE Advanced are now seeing combat. We also have prototypes of the next generation of TIE fighters.
Interesting. The Emperor will want a prototype immediately.
Is it just me, or did half an X-Wing tour of duty manage to sneak its way in here? I'd be shaking my fist at the thought of being fed reheated filler if the whole thing hadn't gone by in the blink of an eye. Now at least they'll let us fly the TIE Advance, right?
TIE Interceptor Gamma 1 will clear the mines around this rebel supply cache, then inspect the containers.
I'm sorry, what?
Gamma 2 and 3 will observe and learn how a hotshot pilot clears a minefield in an unshielded craft.
Come again? You're joking, right? He must be joking. Where's the briefing officer?
Do as your commander orders, but remain alert for the unexpected. This mission puts you at unnecessary risk. We believe you may be in danger. If so, do not hesitate to call for reinforcements. We have made special arrangements.
Huh.
All right, Gamma 1. Show us how a great pilot clears a minefield. Gamma 2 and 3, here's your chance to learn from the expert. Get going, Gamma 1. Your loyalty is being questioned.
Actually trying to clear a minefield in an unshielded craft is basically a death sentence, so of course there are bonus objectives for doing it. You shouldn't though, because if you haven't figured it out yet, this is obviously a trap meant to get you killed.
Enough of this charade. Gamma 1 is the Emperor's stool pigeon. Gamma 2 and 3, destroy Gamma 1 now.
And all this is exactly what I've been talking about regarding the integration of story into the missions. Not only are they doing that in a big way, they're directly involving the player in the proceedings. This marks a turning point in the game. While you could describe what came before as a story, I wouldn't call it much of one. There was a sequence of events that occurred in a logical order, but no point of view character to contextualize them and demonstrate why they matter. Now all of a sudden, somebody wants us dead, personally. Contextualize that. What follows is an experience that much more closely resembles what you might expect from a game that says Star Wars on the box today. This guy has wronged us, which might motivate us to do something about it in the way a character in the story might. It's not surprising that they would do something like this. What is baffling is that they'd wait until you're 2/3 of the way through the game before doing it. The only other example of something like this I can think of is Warframe, which sounds like an insane comparison to make, but if you know, you know. Come to think of it, the most obvious difference between Battle 5 and the preceding ones is that you have to complete those first 4 before you can play 5. This means that it has some history it can rely on, and it can upset the status quo without having to worry about stepping on the toes of other battles that you may or may not play after it. I think we can confidently declare this little experiment in non-linearity a failure. Whatever marginal benefits there are don't even come close to outweighing the drawbacks. Getting back to the mission itself, it's technically unique in that there are no primary objectives. However, if you manage to escape, you still might find yourself looking at the mission failed screen if you haven't completed all the secondary objectives, effectively making them the same as primary objectives in any other mission. The gimmick is that you're supposed to call for reinforcements, but if you wait for long enough, they'll come on their own.
Osprey together. You've been set up. We're here to rescue you.
Having the Osprey arrive is one of the objectives.
The rebel cruiser has entered the area. Vulture. Markov's first officer is on his way to a rebel ship. Markov is obviously leading a vast conspiracy of traitors.
Harkov deploys some TIE Advance to stop you, which are very difficult to kill due to their extremely high mobility, but there's enough chaos going on that you should be able to sneak through with only a few singe marks. No, the objectives I have a problem with are the ones for scanning the containers, which is what Harkov asked you to do. Why should I care what he wants? He's a traitor. They really should have made those ones bonus objectives so they wouldn't be required.
Harkov is now on the run. His illegal arms deals and misappropriation of Navy funds have been revealed. Worse, it is also evident Harkov intends to lead a mass defection of the units in his command. The Emperor is sending Lord Vader to interrogate him before his execution as a traitor. Our orders are to bring Harkov to Lord Vader. Our first task will be to locate him and fix his position. We have several possible locations for a rebel supply station where Harkov may seek refuge. Assault Gunboat Recon will send flight groups of 4 ships to each of these locations in order to find Harkov. Destroy any cargo containers at your target site as quickly as possible, and return if Harkov shows up. Avoid engaging Harkov's forces unless attacked. You must report back, so his capture can be planned.
This is the second time we've had to fight Imperial craft mixed in with all the rebels, a trend that will only intensify as we go deeper into the game. And hey, more different kinds of enemies to fight can only be good, right? It's like a game dev life hack. Double your enemy variety in one easy step. Droids hate it. Some might say, if you want to fight Imperials, you can just play X-Wing, and to that I say, shut up. I'd much rather fight them in this far better game, if you don't mind. Plus, we were in Rebel ships when we did it, so it was slightly different. There's not much to say about the difference between fighting Rebels and Imperial defectors, because at the end of the day, it is all that, slight differences. We're not exactly going from Protoss to Zerg here, for as different as their war strategies are in the fiction, in-game they field relatively similar ships that end up serving basically identical roles. Bomber, Interceptor, Frigate, multi-role fighter. Oh, that one actually is meaningfully different on account of the power imbalance. In much the same way that the X-Wing was so much better than the TIE Fighter that it changed the course of the war, the TIE Advanced, or Avenger, is better enough than the X-Wing that it should do the same. Speak of the devil. With Harkov's ship come his TIE Avengers. Associating him with the Avengers is clever. Not only did he betray us personally, but he's also rubbing the cool new ship that we can't have in our face. And anybody who actually tries to tussle with them is in for a bad time, which can only add to the beef with this guy.
Those TIE Avengers have us outgunned and outclassed. We're also outnumbered. Let's get out there while we can.
Me, on the other hand, well, I listen to my squad mates when they tell me not to do something stupid.
Yes, Lord Vader.
My master, I have tracked Admiral Harkov to a rebel space installation.
I want Admiral Harkov captured alive. We must apprehend all the traitors under his command.
I will see to it personally.
Do not fail me, Vader. Harkov's fleet must not escape.
I tracked Harkov to a rebel space installation? Don't you mean our pilots tracked? You know what? Forget I said anything.
Your reconnaissance mission hit the jackpot. Admiral Harkov's flagship, Victory-class Star Destroyer Protector, has been located. Assault Gunboat Mu will be sent back immediately in order to interdict an emergency supply convoy now en route. The TIE Advanced, which gave you such a hard time on your last mission, will still be there, so be careful. You'll be hitting the convoy far enough out that the TIE Advanced fighters won't be able to stop you in time to save it. As soon as the convoy has been destroyed, return to base to prepare for the next mission.
This one's actually a little tough if you insist on doing the secondary objectives, because that means sticking around long enough for the Avengers to show up. Not only that, but you need to distract your wingmates in order to prevent them from destroying the freighters before you can inspect them. It's an interesting bit of tightrope walking that definitely works best as an optional objective. If you just want to destroy the freighters and peace out, it's easy as pie. Hit and fade continues to be the tactic of choice.
The successful interdiction of the supply convoy has left Victory-class Star Destroyer Protector stranded at the Rebel station. The TIE advanced fighters that have given us so much trouble are now going to meet their match. Recon Squadron Mu's first group of TIE advanced will go to your unit. Now you will fight on equal ground. The next phase of the battle requires us to eliminate Harkov's fighters so he can be captured. Harkov's total strength outnumbers your force, but you will only be engaging a single flight group at a time.
This has been a long time coming. Finally, we can fight fire with fire. I probably don't even need to introduce it because we've been hearing about it for half the game, but the TIE Advanced, or TIE Avenger, depending on how awkward it would be to use the word advanced in any particular sentence, is a massively upgraded take on the TIE format with all the bells and whistles the rebels have been holding over us, only better. Hyperdrive, torpedo launchers that come standard, double the shield strength of an X-Wing, and to top it all off, absolutely insane speed. This thing can outrun an A-Wing without even having to divert powers from shields. A near-perfect ship. The only thing that's missing is a pair of ion cannons, but that would just be ridiculous. Too bad we're on equal footing here, so we don't get to lord it over them the way they did for us.
Admiral Harkov has for unknown reasons taken refuge on the Rebel outpost. Victory-class Star Destroyer Protector has fled. Mines have been deployed around the station, and Rebel reinforcements are rushing to rescue Harkov. Recon Squadron Mu will send TIE Advanced fighters and assault gunboats to join with Special Operations stormtroopers aboard assault transports. The assault gunboats and TIE Advanced fighters will take out any remaining fighter defenses and clear the minefield. The assault transports will arrive 3 minutes after the assault gunboats and begin the assault on the platform. Assault gunboat Mu and the assault transports will disable the platform and any craft attempting to escape. The stormtroopers will conduct boarding operations and take control of the platform. Lord Vader will arrive aboard the Imperial Star Destroyer Garrett, and Harkov will be brought to him.
And as soon as they've given us a taste, they yank it away from us. I understand that the gunboat has ion cannons, but can't the transports handle that? Technically, we're only supposed to assist as a backup. Of course, we can't actually trust them with this, but maybe if we had an Avenger, we could have cleared the way for them. For now, the mission has a somewhat interesting gimmick in that you need to figure out which of the 3 possible escape ships Harkov is using to make his getaway. Well, not really, since he always picks the same one and you need to disable all 3 of them regardless. It would have been cool if they could have randomized that or something. It's still important to know which one Harkov is on, because that's the one you absolutely cannot destroy. Letting Harkov die is a mission failure because he knows all sorts of important information that can be interrogated out of him. Plus, the Emperor said so, and we wouldn't want to cross the Emperor. That'd be really bad. His vehicle of choice is the Corellian transport cheekily named Getaway. Get it? Corellian transports, as you may know, are renowned for their speed.
It's a ship that made the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs.
Or something like that, which makes catching it in our slow-ass gunboat a bit of a trick. Concussion missiles help. It's gotta be missiles, because anything bigger will one-shot him. Don't ask how I know.
Welcome, Admiral Harkov. We have a matter to discuss. What is the location of your fleet? Now you shall pay for your treachery.
All that important information that we needed to get, hence the requirement that we bring this guy in alive. Thank you so much, Lord Vader. Masterful interrogation, sir.
The TIE Advanced, after much delay, has finally reached the frontline units and has begun to see action against the rebellion. Admiral Zarin's team has continued working on and improving the TIE series of starfighters, and has built prototypes of a radically redesigned TIE. 6 prototypes of this newest TIE starfighter, designated the TIE Defender, will be taken to the Emperor on Coruscant for his personal review. Your task is to ensure the safety of the loading operation.
One mission. One single mission. That's all we got to enjoy the TIE Avenger for before they went, oh, that piece of crap? That's old and busted. You want the new hotness, the TIE Defender. At least they let us fly the Avenger while we cry about it. This mission is all about throwing caution to the wind and using the Avenger's tremendous speed to intercept a couple B-Wings before they can attack the transports. And that's it. That's the whole mission, which takes about 5 minutes. And the priest is gone too. I'm getting shades of Battle 4 here. Thankfully, it doesn't last long, because the next mission is basically the same concept, only they actually fleshed it out with multiple waves and other things going on, like some corvettes jumping in to lay a minefield. And we get a cutscene afterward.
We have finished our analysis of Admiral Zaren's new TIE fighter. It outperforms the new TIE Advanced.
Excellent. The Admiral is fortunate it did not fall into rebel hands. Why was security so careless?
Admiral Zaren suspects a rebel spy has infiltrated his research facility. He is investigating the matter. He reports that the rebels have a new weapon technology.
Keep me informed. The rebels must not gain any advantage.
Assault Gunboat Group Tau is to escort a supply convoy bearing equipment for Admiral Zaren's new beam weapon. The development program has reached a critical phase and can't proceed without the new equipment. The convoy will come out of hyperspace far from the research platform and will be temporarily vulnerable.
We're once again defending the TIE Defender, although this time it's just a technology related to it, so at least we don't have to keep looking at them. The priest has a rather ominous sounding message.
You have served the Emperor well. Your loyalty will be rewarded. Continue to do your duty.
But it turns out this is just because the secondary objective comes up spontaneously in the middle of the mission. Out of nowhere, a ton of B-Wings suddenly jump in, which should be cause for panic, but...
The B-Wings are using a new weapon we've never seen before.
The Mag Pulse, used exclusively by rebels in this game, is a missile that drains your weapon energy. That's it. If it did that in addition to dealing damage, you could maybe say they were cooking here, but just weapon energy? Oh no, you've deprived me of something that recharges really quickly. Whatever will I do? At least drain my shields while you're at it. The priest wants to get a look at it, of course, so you're supposed to disable at least one of them for capture. This is actually quite difficult because the rebels send a crack team of A-Wings to erase all the evidence, which are very hard to deal with in a gunboat. Neither of them should have bothered. Just think, if they had loaded those bad boys up with standard torpedoes, they could have derailed the TIE Defender program. But no, they just had to get too clever for their own good.
The Rebels' new Mag Pulse technology was developed by Galactic Electronics in the corporate sector. Secretly developing new weapons is bad enough. Selling them to enemies of the Empire is treason. The traitor's deep space research facility is to be seized and stripped of all new technology. Assault Gunboat Group Tau will lead the attack. Destroy any opposition and disable any craft attempting to escape. Assault Transport Group Omega will enter the area 3 minutes after the attack starts. Their stormtroopers will conduct the boarding and seizure of assets and/or prisoners. Imperial-class Star Destroyer Glory will then arrive to receive the captured prisoners and impounded materials.
I mean, really, selling the Mag Pulse to the rebels should be considered an act of sabotage. I think Galactic Electronics have been tragically misunderstood here. This mission is weirdly similar in concept to the one where you capture Harkov, in that you're trying to disable a platform in a gunboat and you also need to disable 3 different ships that try to get away. They're even the same kinds of ships, but once again, the light touch of concussion missiles comes in handy.
Is the beam weapon completed?
Yes, Admiral Zaren. We are ready to deploy the weapon.
Excellent. Begin arming my fighter squadrons at once.
Yes, sir.
Now, some good news for you. You've been selected to receive advanced combat training in the new TIE Defender. Report to the combat chamber and select the TIE Defender missions.
I was always a little confused on what order to do the training missions in. If you read the manual closely, you'll learn that you're supposed to do the first mission for each ship type. So you'd do TIE Fighter Mission 1, then Interceptor Mission 1, and so on, then loop around to Fighter Mission 2, which I very much doubt anybody actually did. But at least it says that somewhere. You're not supposed to do the ships that were added in the expansions until you finish the base game though, right? But they don't say which are which anywhere. I took one look at the TIE Defender and dismissed it as the typically overpowered expansion ship. Besides, it's called Defender of the Empire, isn't it? Come on. Well, as it turns out, even though I was wrong about that, I was actually right to avoid the training missions until now. Go figure.
While you have been practicing on the TIE Defender, Lord Vader has located the defecting forces. With their leader gone, Harkov's men are bent on turning their fleet over to the rebels. As the first step in destroying Harkov's fleet, the Interdictor Harpax will hyperspace into the Ortega system and use its gravity well generators to trap Harkov's flagship, the Victory-class Star Destroyer Protector. Our reconnaissance flights report that the Protector is currently taking on rebel supplies. Your mission is to take out the rebel cargo containers near the Protector and protect the Harpax from counterattack.
While I did complain about them going through the whole tease rigmarole twice in a row, I gotta admit, they are giving us new toys at a pretty good pace. Like this new beam weapon sounds like it's gonna be pretty
Your craft will also be equipped with a tractor beam weapon.
Oh, not that kind of beam. A tractor beam.
My disappointment is immeasurable. And my day is ruined.
When activated, the tractor beam will reduce the turn speed of any ship within weapons range and in a fairly narrow cone around your sights. The effect is not as pronounced as I would like, and to be honest, I find it to be not worth the trouble you have to go through to use it most of the time. It has its own energy reserves, just like lasers or ions, but instead of drawing from your laser power, it has its own meter that you have to manage in addition to everything else. Most of the time, I just treated it as another thing I could turn off to get some extra engine power. This mission is also notable for having an Interdictor, which you might know as the funky Star Destroyer with the globe sticking out of it that prevents nearby ships from entering hyperspace. First introduced in one of the source books for the Star Wars tabletop role-playing game and implemented in Timothy Zahn's novels, the Interdictor is another one of those ideas that were too good to leave on the table, even in the Disney canon. The concept of a ship that prevents anybody caught in its influence from escaping is just far too useful as a plot device. Just between you and me, though, the interdiction effect doesn't appear to actually work. Or it's precise enough to only work on enemy ships, but that seems way too elegant for Star Wars technology. I won't tell the defectors if you don't, okay? Also, don't be like me and leave the containers for last thinking they won't be going anywhere. They literally are going somewhere. There are heavy lifters and cargo ferries moving them to the Protector's cargo bay, and you will fail the missions over 10 minutes in if they succeed. It's frustrating, but at least it's telegraphed. You can see it happening right in front of you if you pay attention. None of that X-Wing gotcha crap that happens literally out of nowhere to be found here.
I am close to capturing Admiral Harkov's fleet.
Excellent Lord Vader. Harkov's fleet must not fall in rebel hands. Be on guard. The Secret Order has alerted me of danger.
I will keep you informed of my progress.
Rely on the members of the Secret Order to carry out your mission. They have proved most valuable.
I don't know if I should be side-eyeing Vader for somehow having the time to deliver this message personally, or just happy to be praised by the Emperor himself.
The Harpax, in its attempt to pin down the forces that Harkov used to command, has put itself in a precarious position. Harkov's old flagship, the Protector, the frigate Akaga, and the rebel-commanded light cruiser Warhawk are all closing in to finish off the Harpax. Your mission goal is to attack the frigate Akaga, thus buying some time until Lord Vader can arrive in the Imperial Star Destroyer Garrett.
Destroying the Ikaga is a bit trickier than it might first appear. You might think Star Destroyers are the toughest ships in space, but you're wrong. Frigates, with their very efficient and extremely deadly turret coverage and their considerable shield strength that can't be bypassed by blowing up a conveniently placed dome, reign supreme. Capital ship combat has undergone some significant improvements since X-Wing. Like in that game, they attack you with lots of free-aiming laser turrets. Only now, not only are the turrets visible on the ship's model, but you can target and destroy them. Actually doing so is a bit awkward though, because the targeting UI is optimized for fighting ships your own size. The crosshairs light up in green when you're on target, but they make no distinction between the massive hull spanning your entire screen and the tiny turret you're trying to bullseye. Not to mention that if you can hit them, they can hit you, and being pelted by powerful capship lasers does this process no favors. Of course, the best way to take down a capship in X-Wing was from a distance with heavy ordnance, and that hasn't changed. But they now have a way to defend themselves in the form of warhead launchers, which they use to intercept any warheads coming their way. You can target and destroy these launchers either by overwhelming them with more warheads than they can deal with at once, or with lasers, although in the case of frigates, good luck actually doing that. However, there's a way to sneak your bombs past these defenses without having to deal with any of that. See, a capship will only target warheads if they're actively locked onto it, so if you dumbfire them, they just slip right through. I doubt this technique was originally intended to be so effective, but it remains unfixed in later games in the series, which even recommend it as a strategy, so they seem to have embraced it nonetheless. Even with the Ikaga gone, that still leaves 2 enemy capital ships, so we gotta survive until...
Imperial Star Destroyer Garrett to all loyal Imperial forces. The time for victory is now.
Just in time to steal the credit.
Alpha 2, you will return to the Star Destroyer Garrett.
The rebel and defecting forces are closing in on Interdictor Harpax. If they can destroy it, they will escape. Lord Vader's plan calls for Admiral Zarin to bring his forces in for the final destruction of the enemy. The Interdictor is the key to this plan. As long as it survives, the enemy is trapped. TIE Advanced Group Alpha will lead the attack force to eliminate any enemy vessel that gets too close to the Harpax. Light Cruiser Warhawk is the greater threat because Victory-class Star Destroyer Protector isn't fast enough to catch the Harpax.
Unlike in Wing Commander, you don't want to get too close. They'll send a wall of lasers your way that is likely to intercept your warheads. Instead, you fire them from as far away as possible. Hell, you can just hang out by your rearming buddy and send a steady stream of rockets their way at your leisure, which makes a mockery of the whole concept. It's interesting that it's only now, within spitting distance of the end of the game, that we actually have to duke it out with large capital ships. I think it shows the developers realize that capital ship combat is still kind of awkward. Even in their current, massively improved incarnation, they still work much better as obstacles and storytelling devices than they do as actual opponents. Longtime viewers of this channel will know that I've long been searching for a game that really nailed capital ship combat, and, well, I'm still looking.
The first of Zarin's forces have arrived. Zarin's ships are attacking Imperial-class Star Destroyer Garrett. The treachery is worse than we imagined. The Emperor must be in danger. We must return to Coruscant.
There's a weird sense of deja vu to this twist. Like, didn't we just go through this with Harkov? Oh well, at least they didn't spoil it in a cutscene this time.
It is now clear that Admiral Zarin has been plotting a coup d'etat against the Emperor. Imperial-class Star Destroyer Garrett can't make it to Coruscant in time to warn Emperor Palpatine of the danger he faces. The only craft fast enough to possibly make it is the new TIE Defender, but we have only a handful. Lord Vader has requested that you lead the strike team. Lord Vader will fly with you in the number 6 craft. You will rendezvous with modified frigate Osprey in order to have your craft outfitted with advanced missiles. From there, you will proceed to Coruscant to stop Zarin. Other forces are rushing there also. Report to the hangar immediately. There is no time to lose. Zarin will pay for this vile betrayal.
The TIE Defender is a truly ridiculous ship. I joked that putting ion cannons on an Avenger would make it the perfect ship, so why don't we start there? Yeah, it's got ions. What of it? You could just casually disable a capital ship or handle any objective that would have required a gunboat before. Why do we even bother keeping these things in the fleet now? Get out of here. 200 SDB shields, making it twice as tanky as an Avenger or 4 times an X-Wing for those keeping score. They also recharge faster. Not faster enough to actually matter, but it's the thought that counts. What does matter is that you have 6 guns worth of energy to pull from to keep it fed. Why bother using it to shoot your enemies? You could just ram them, it's fine. Its listed top speed is 155 units, which already makes it the fastest ship in the game on paper, but that's actually underselling it by quite a bit. Because, you see, it comes with a tractor beam, standard. When they shoehorned it onto the Avenger, it was a net negative power draw, which was no big deal since you could just turn it off, but consider that the listed top speed is with every power setting at the default of 50%, and in the Defender's case that includes the tractor beam, which means that if you divert all that power to your engines, you can get to 273 units, which is so ludicrously fast that you will probably spend more time decelerating to a reasonable speed than you did actually traveling to your destination. Even the standard loadout of all-in lasers still has you going impractically fast. You're going to be constantly overtaking whatever it is you're trying to chase, at which point you might as well put some power into shields and the tractor beam. Believe me, there's plenty to go around. The expansion battles better explain how all traces of these got destroyed, because the idea that the Empire had access to a fighter like this and still somehow managed to lose the war is quite frankly absurd. Oh, and Vader's here too, I guess. He's quite chatty.
Zarin has prepared a trap for us. We can't enter hyperspace as long as that Interdictor is here. We'll have to fight our way out. We'll start with the assault gunboats. Excellent. The first kill is ours. These traitors must pay the ultimate price. You are endowed with the power to destroy the enemy.
Which is probably what people wanted at the time, to just hear him say a bunch of stuff. I think we've all heard better James Earl Jones impersonations at this point, but it could be worse.
These skibidi toilets, are they some new form of rebel alliance?
I got excited when the briefing officer said this.
A word of advice. Don't issue any in-flight orders to the Dark Lord.
But sadly, he just ignores your orders rather than murdering you for your insolence. Although our objective is to protect him, his craft is invincible, so if you think about it, it's more like he's escorting us. However, according to QA tester Darren Johnson, it actually is possible to damage Vader by crashing into his ship, which is why one day he decided to see if he could kill the Dark Lord by repeatedly ramming his ship while managing his shield regeneration to stay ahead. Apparently, it took 2 hours, but he was able to kill Vader, which resulted in a mission failure, as intended. I'll take his word for it.
The Emperor's ship, the Majestic, has been seized, and the Emperor himself abducted by Zarin. Zarin's flagship, the Glory, waits off in the distance for the shuttle holding the Emperor to arrive. You will lead a group of TIE defenders to locate and disable the craft carrying the Emperor. The fate of the Emperor and the entire Empire is in your hands.
Well, this is it. The final mission, the climax of the story. And I can't help but feel a little underwhelmed. The stakes are right. There's no higher honor than personally rescuing the Emperor, although I have to wonder how this guy managed to let himself get captured by a bunch of non-Force users. But leaving that aside, waves of TIE Avengers and a horde of escort shuttles, rear turrets blasting, are very dangerous threats, or at least they would be to anything less than a TIE Defender. They just lack that end-of-the-game spectacle I'm looking for. X-Wing ended with the Death Star, which is pretty much unbeatable as far as spectacle goes. The best George Lucas himself was able to come up with was a bigger Death Star, so I guess I can't blame them for quitting while they were ahead, but shuttles and TIEs just seem so pedestrian.
We are here to honor one. who has served the Empire.
I was actually kind of surprised to be dumped out into the concourse. I really thought they were going to have at least one more mission to end things on a bit more of a bang. But oh well. There are more missions, of course. Zarin escapes, pursued by Thrawn, setting the stage for a substantial amount of expansion content. But on launch day in 1994, this was it. And so too is it the extent of what we'll be looking at today. As a game, that was magnificent. As a story, it's a very odd specimen in that it barely exists outside of the odd bit of foreshadowing for the first 2/3 of the game, and then starts strong with Harkov personally betraying the player character and stealing their TIE Avenger, but then they immediately kill him off and don't bother establishing any personal stakes in the proceedings for them ever again. The result is that TIE Fighter fails to deliver the kind of character-driven melodrama that Star Wars is known for. I think their biggest mistake might have actually been in making that standout mission and inadvertently proving that delivering a story like that through gameplay was possible, should you want to do it. They just didn't. It's kind of a shame, but ultimately inconsequential. At worst, the story is at least always providing a good reason for why you're out there blasting rebels, and that's all it needs to do. The first time the public got the chance to fly for the Empire was not the retail release. Rather, it was a now little-known demo that came around 6 months earlier. But before we go any further, we need to say hello to Neon. To the 1994 Dodge Neon, that is. Hi. You must have questions. So, the prospect of getting a demo in front of consumers was desirable, but you couldn't just throw it up on Steam back then. The shareware scene was around, but it was a niche thing. In order to reach the mainstream, you would need to meet them where they were, in stores. But the logistics of printing all those floppy disks, shipping them to stores, and convincing them to give them away was beyond LucasArts' budget at the time. Enter Dodge, who inexplicably showed up looking to do a co-marketing deal. They would pay for the printing and distribution of demo discs, with the only caveat being that the disc would also feature an ad for their new car. Pretty sweet deal, all things considered. Looking between the lines a bit, it's likely that Dodge was pitched on the idea by Shamrock Communications, the new age marketing company that designed the ad itself and worked out all the actual distribution stuff, including a deal to pack the demos in with Computer Gaming World magazine. Safety, huh? Let's see here. The first generation Neon earned a poor rating in an offset frontal crash test conducted by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. IIHS rated the Neon among the highest rates of driver deaths. Interesting. Anyway, you don't have to sit through most of this, just the part where you say hi, and then you can click through to the demo. First, there's a slideshow of screenshots from the cutscenes and concourse UI. Some demos back then were just that, but if you click through, you get an ersatz briefing. It's low on details, but you can find those in the included README file, which you will need to do to make sense of the objectives, since none of the menus have been implemented, including the goals screen. It actually has a passage written from the perspective of the player character, presumably Merrick, which says this is their first real mission. Loading in, you'll immediately notice some differences from what you're used to, because seeing as this was made at least 6 months before the final game, it's in a significantly earlier stage of development. For one thing, the cockpit looks completely different from how it does in the retail game. The music and sounds are straight out of floppy X-Wing, right down to the weird and kinda bad sounding MIDI synth laser effects. It's also using the old renderer, running at a very chunky 320x240 with not a Garou shade to be found. The target display is in the old X-Wing style, only showing vague information about the state of your target, except it's buggy, often failing to show the correct state. Speaking of bugs, at one point my laser power gauge just stopped updating. Also, the game hitches every time you select a new target for some reason. The target nearest enemy button uses the old X-Wing selection criteria, excluding non-fighters, much to my chagrin. The outside threat indicator is here, although it seems to work a little differently from the final game, lighting up red regardless of whether you're targeted by a fighter or a capital ship, and flashing between orange and green when a missile is after you. The mission itself, exclusive to this demo, takes place during the Battle of Hoth and has us destroying a rebel repair yard, then lying in wait for the rebels fleeing the battle, who begin arriving almost immediately after you finish up with the yard. They come in staggered waves of Y-Wings, X-Wings, A-Wings, shuttles, freighters, and corvettes. The fighters and corvettes stick around to fight, while the freighters and shuttles take a moment to get their bearings and then leave. So the challenge is to quickly take out all the transportation vehicles before they can escape, while regularly culling the combat ones to stop them from getting out of hand. At least, that's the idea. Corvettes use their weird floppy X-Wing model with the funky engine block, but they have visible turrets. I wasn't able to confirm whether they could be destroyed because the Corvettes come in without shields and die very quickly. Once you've cleared every wave, you'll get a message saying the ambush is a success, the rebels have been defeated, the Emperor will be pleased. But if you stick around for a while, some A-Wings with the designation Rogue W and Rogue M will start jumping in at regular intervals. Going back to the README for a second, the primary objective is just to take out the repair yard, with the secondary objective being to destroy all the rebel ships except the last one, which I guess is supposed to be Wedge Antilles flying an A-Wing for some reason, serving as the bonus objective. You kinda have to keep score yourself though, because I don't think any logic looking for that has been implemented into the game. It certainly doesn't give you any feedback as it's happening. I suppose I couldn't rule out an end screen that tallies them up, though I doubt it. I can't completely rule it out though, as I wasn't able to get to Wedge, a feat that can apparently take up to 2 hours on a successful run according to forum posts. Your TIE seems to be significantly tougher than the ones in X-Wing or retail TIE Fighter, but it still lacks shields, making it a very strict battle of attrition. It's not even the rebels that ended up frustrating me to the point of giving up, rather it's my insanely trigger-happy allies. Friendly fire is a problem, to the point that it's covered in the README. As if there's anything you could reasonably do to protect yourself from these absolute maniacs beyond just sitting out the battle. It really helps me appreciate their decision to turn off friendly fire for the AI in the final game. And yeah, that's the pre-release demo. Now for the version you were expecting, the original retail release of TIE Fighter on 5 floppy disks for DOS computers in July 1994. The most noticeable technological difference between X-Wing and TIE Fighter is the addition of Garou shading. You can still toggle the old flat shading method so you can see the difference, as I accidentally did at some point during my playthrough. With the old style, each surface of a ship's model gets lit differently. This style tends to emphasize the polygonal nature of a model because the harsh differences between the surfaces draws your attention to the edges between them. With the new Garou shading, a different lighting value can be assigned to each corner of a surface, and the game will gradually transition between them. Not only does this result in much more naturalistic looking lighting, but it eliminates those harsh transitions between the surfaces, resulting in much smoother, less polygonal looking models. The game still runs at 320 by 240 resolution, which is unfortunate because that's simply not enough pixels to render things legibly at the longer end of the ranges you tend to encounter things in. They did make one improvement over X-Wing in this regard, which is that your current target gets a box drawn over it when it exceeds a certain distance from you, so everything else might be a soupy mess at long distance, but you can at least tell that your target is on screen. I kinda wish they'd just show the box all the time, but that might also be an adaptation to the low resolution. When you have so few pixels to work with, you can only draw your lines so thin, so maybe it would have taken up too much screen space, I don't know. Seeing as the game shipped on floppy disks, they could only fit so much voice content on them. Just like X-Wing, you get spoken dialogue in cutscenes and for generic exclamations during gameplay, like but that's it. TIE Fighter received a single expansion pack, Defender of the Empire, later in 1994, continuing the story from where the base game left off with 3 new battles. As the name implies, it's mainly focused on giving you more time in the TIE Defender, which, if you'll recall, you only got to fly for a whopping 2 missions in the base game. It also included a new ship, the incredible new missile boat. And it almost makes me wish I hadn't scoped the expansion content out of this video, because it's not just a ridiculously overpowered expansion ship, although it is still that. It also represents totally games at its most games. Totally. Pushing the power management system to its absolute limit and really emphasizing Lawrence Holland's house style. Ah well, perhaps another time. One thing that may be bothering you is that while the cockpit graphics have been redone since the demo, they might still not be what you're used to. They certainly aren't what you've been seeing in the video up to this point. In order to get to the bottom of this, I think it's best we move on to TIE Fighter Collector's CD-ROM, released in 1995, which was an enhanced version of the game featuring a number of improvements and additions. The first one that probably comes to mind, seeing as this is the CD version, is the additional voice acting. Not only are all briefings and debriefings voiced, but all mid-mission dialogue, making space a much livelier place. While testing for the CD version, QA noticed that there were a number of dialogue triggers in the original release that you could never see in-game because the conditions for their appearance were impossible to achieve. So in fixing that, we got some additional dialogue as well. But alright, the cockpits. So one of the biggest improvements was the addition of a high resolution mode, allowing you to render the game at 640 by 480, or double the original pixel density. This is a significant boost to the game's playability, finally allowing you to gaze at ships from far away without feeling like you have space cataracts. Very nice. But those original cockpits were made for the original lower resolution and would stand out as overly pixelated, so new high-resolution cockpit graphics were made. The new cockpits tend to be a lot darker than the old ones and have more of a pre-rendered CG look to them. Although the old ones could also be untouched renders for all I know, they're so pixelated that it's genuinely hard to tell. They also made a number of changes to the intro cinematic. In my X-Wing video, I lamented the way they kept replacing more and more of the beautiful pixel art in the original with more and more ugly CG, so I was bracing for the worst, but in this case, they mostly just replaced scenes that were already CG with better CG and better cinematography. Like these fleet massing scenes look much more impressive with a downright intimidating volume of ships. The TIE Interceptors attacking the Rebel base have been replaced with bombers, which makes a lot of sense if you think about it. They actually did replace the pixel art effect with the base exploding, but it was a pretty jank one, so I'll allow it. And then they replaced one of the X-Wings at the end with an A-Wing, just for variety's sake. I can't really fault them for any of that. The CD version included not only the Defender of the Empire expansion, but another expansion's worth of new content, with 3 additional battles, bringing the total up to 13. So obviously they meant to release 2 expansions like they did with X-Wing, but by the time they were finished, they decided it was too late and just stuck them in with this version. No new ships were added, unfortunately, but there are already plenty to play around with, so it's fine. The new campaign is called Enemies of the Empire, which seems like it doesn't sufficiently differentiate itself from Defender of the Empire to me, but since it was never sold separately, I guess it doesn't matter. They made a new demo for this version, which came with another ad for the Dodge Neon, if you can believe it. Only this time it was one of several cars you could ogle in a mist-like virtual plaza, which is itself a fascinating cultural artifact that almost deserves its own spotlight. And I'm only mostly saying that because of how much of a pain in the ass it was to get running. Only mostly. Sadly, the demo itself is a lot less interesting, being a bite-for-bite identical copy of a mission from the full game. It makes sense, the game was already out at this point, so the demo was just pulled from that. Next, we have the 1997 Macintosh release of the Collector's CD-ROM, which I was unfortunately not able to get working. Nor could I find any footage of it online. I managed to get you footage of Wing Commander 2 for the FM Towns and Space Sim for the Play-Doh supercomputer, but somehow these Mac ports still elude me. Not to worry though, I did find some screenshots, and we can use these along with what we know about all the other versions to make some educated guesses about what it must have been like. It's called the Collector's CD-ROM, and it has all the same back-of-the-box blurbs as the DOS one, so we can safely assume it was identical in content. As we can see from the screenshots, the concourse menus have been remade in 640 by 480, and to be honest, they're not that bad. Certainly not the massive downgrade they were in X-Wing. For one thing, they're a lot more faithful to the original graphics. The pixel art at least seems to be depicting the same characters, and I'm half convinced the 3D scenes are literally the same assets re-rendered with some extra lighting effects thrown on. Weirdly, they didn't bother remaking the map screen or close-ups during briefings, so it's a bit jarring swapping art styles as you click around the briefings. Overall, it's fine, but only because the original menus were already drab-looking, mostly untouched CG, so there wasn't very far to fall. The cutscenes are identical to the ones in the DOS versions as far as I can tell, which is nice. They must have already been satisfied with the changes they made to that version. Unlike with X-Wing, the prospect of playing at 640 by 480 was not something Mac users could hold over their PC frenemies because, well, you could already do that in the DOS Collector's CD version. As such, there's never been much of a reason to bother with this version unless you happen to own a Mac at the time. They even had to downgrade the front of the box blurb from Enhanced Mac version to Power Mac Native, seeing as there weren't really any enhancements to speak of. Finally, we have TIE Fighter Collector Series, released in 1998 for Windows, or I guess it's technically just part of the Collector Series package, and its actual name is TIE Fighter Collectors CD, which is technically different from TIE Fighter Collectors CD-ROM, but for the sake of our collective sanity, let's just agree to call it TIE Fighter Collector Series. This version ports everything from the Collector's CD into the more advanced X-Wing vs. TIE Fighter engine. It came as part of the same package that had X-Wing Collector Series, so it shares just about all the same benefits, drawbacks, and quirks. As an early Windows game, you'll probably have a bit of trouble getting it to run at all, but as with X-Wing, there are mods and guides to using them that can fix that for you. Just like with X-Wing, the Mac menus are here, only now with the music removed and replaced with ambient noise. Except they actually did preserve the music for briefings in both simulator rooms, so long as you don't skip the transition animations. Weird. You'll have to sit in silence for the tech room, though. As is customary for the Collector series, the dynamic MIDI soundtrack during gameplay has been replaced with static CD music consisting of tracks straight out of the movie OSTs. Visually, you get much higher poly models with textures and even more advanced lighting. Everybody has their preferences regarding the old models versus the new ones, so I leave it up to you, the viewer, to decide which ones work best. Disappointingly, your resolution options max out at 640 by 480 with no out-of-the-box way to go higher, even with 3D acceleration. If you step out of that box and into some mods, you can run it at any 4x3 resolution you want, or you could stretch it to widescreen if you're an uncultured swine, I guess. Input-wise, they've removed mouse flight support, so you can only play via stick, which seems really bad to me, but this was probably a decision made for XVT before it trickled down into this game. This version is also the first and only one to have official support for flight stick throttles, so there's that, I guess. Though the fact that we're still stuck with 1/3 increments even with native support is disappointing. I want fine control, damn it. Finally, you get engine sounds for your own craft, so you can hear your TIE scream its way through the skies as it was always meant to. I quite like this feature, but it's not enough to make up for the deficiencies of this version. Choosing which version of X-Wing to play was a bit of a conundrum. No matter which one you chose, you were giving something up. My choice of the Collector's series ended up coming down to the resolution in the previous versions being low enough to seriously impact visibility, so I prioritized visual clarity. With TIE Fighter, things are thankfully a lot simpler. The DOS Collector's CD runs at double that old resolution, which is enough to clear things up. It had the match speed button from the start, it's got the same music as the floppy version, and you don't need to do anything extra to set it up. If you're wondering which version of the game to play, it's the DOS CD. The only thing you're missing out on is the most advanced graphics 1998 could muster. But if graphics really are that important to you, you could do better. Yeah, so there is one more way to play the game that I'd be remiss in not mentioning. That would be TIE Fighter Total Conversion, a mod for X-Wing Alliance that remakes the game with improved graphics and modern features. It may not be an official TIE Fighter product, but it's something anybody looking to play the game in the 2020s should consider. Not only does it bring TIE Fighter's gameplay up to speed with X-Wing Alliance, giving it features like laser convergence and much snappier handling, it sits on top of another mod, the X-Wing Alliance Upgrade Project, which adds much more modern graphical features along with assets to match, which, well, you can see for yourself. It even adds some extra fancy pants features like VR and Track IR support. If you decide to try it out, you'll need a copy of X-Wing Alliance, which you can get from Steam or GOG. Be warned, however, that although it's been upgraded, Alliance is still an early Windows game, and so carries with it a lot of early Windows game jank. Things like the resolution constantly changing as you go through different menus, the menu background animations potentially running too fast depending on your refresh rate, the options you want probably not being in the in-game menus at all, forcing you to quit out to a launcher to change them, and the menu flow just being confusing in general. It's nothing insurmountable, but just make sure you're locked in and ready to put in some effort to get started. As you go through the actually quite involved installation process, you'll notice that you get a bunch of options, the most important of which is whether you want to play the classic or reimagined campaign. The classic campaign is a way to play the original missions in the new engine, as in literally the original mission files ported over. This is the option to take if you want something as close as possible to the original experience but with better graphics. However, I must caution you that you won't really be getting a fully authentic experience this way. Although X-Wing Alliance is a continuation of the same engine, it's multiple generations removed, and so carries with it numerous changes to its physics, AI, ship behaviors, and so on. For example, if you play the first tutorial mission and follow the instructions you're given to the letter, you will very likely end up dead, because exploding containers in Alliance shoot out debris much further than they did in TIE Fighter. Another example is that Alliance doesn't support optional mission objectives, so the person porting them had to decide whether to remove them or promote them to mandatory primary objectives. They opted to make them mandatory, significantly increasing the difficulty of the missions in the process. Unless you really value those better graphics, I wouldn't recommend doing this. In my opinion, faithful remakes are a fool's game. If you want something as close as possible to the original game, well, the original game's right there. The whole point of remaking something is to change it, so go big or go home, I say. I'd much rather have a bold new take on something than a categorically failed attempt to recreate it. Which brings us to the Reimagined campaign. This is a set of missions built from scratch to embody the basic idea of the original missions, or in some cases original ideas, but built to take advantage of the new engine and the higher production values available to us nowadays. As a result, they're a lot more epic in scale, with far more ships fighting on both sides, and a lot more dialogue going off all the time, like you might find in the Free Space games, or say, Wing Commander Saga. Also, at least in my limited experience, the reimagined missions trended towards being significantly harder and more action-packed than the original ones. When playing them, they seemed to be much longer than their counterparts in the original game, but upon checking the footage, the mission times were actually pretty closely in line with each other. So it's more like the missions just feel longer because they're so densely packed with stuff. I cracked open the mission files for Battle 1 Mission 2 and its equivalent in TFTC and counted up all the enemy ships that appear on medium difficulty. In the original mission, 13 ships show up to attack Outpost D-34. In TFTC, it's 108. Now, this does come with a corresponding increase in the number of friendly craft around to help you deal with all of that, but even still, I think you'll agree that's a lot. In the course of defending Outpost D-34, you have to take so many more discrete actions, destroy that many more Y-Wings and Z-95s, intercept that many more torpedoes, and at the end of it all, it's kind of exhausting, and much easier to screw up. As such, I probably wouldn't recommend TIE Fighter TC to first-time players. Unless something about the graphics or features like VR or Track IR really speak to you, I think you're probably better off just playing the original game. However, in the likely event that you have played TIE Fighter already, I think TFTC is a great option to consider for revisiting it. Going all the way back to late 1994, TIE Fighter released to universal acclaim. A core memory of mine is of going to my local library and discovering that they had a subscription to PC Gamer magazine. Their preview coverage of Jedi Knight was instrumental in getting me to convince my parents to buy a computer, which had a pretty profound effect on the rest of my life now that I think about it. Unfortunately, it seems like nobody has preserved the issue with their review of TIE Fighter online. It's also possible that they didn't review it for some reason, because surely it would at least merit a mention on the front cover if they did, but alas, many of these issues aren't online to check. But I do have my memories to go on. Only a few months after the Jedi Knight one, they did their list of the 50 best games ever, and this one didn't get preserved either. So you'll just have to take my word for it when I tell you that the game they chose for the #1 spot was TIE Fighter. To the best of my memory anyway. So it must have reviewed pretty well, is what I'm saying. Computer Gaming World, which by this point was scoring their reviews, gave it 5 stars, heaping praise on it over its improved accessibility and better integrated story in particular, with the only attempt at substantial criticism being a hypothetical worry that grognard X-Wing fans might find it too easy. And hey, going by some of the responses to my criticism of X-Wing, it would only make sense for those posters to consider TIE Fighter to be casual trash. But somehow I doubt that's actually the case. CGW's readers agreed with the review, immediately shooting it to the top 10 in their polls, a place that it maintained all the way up to mid-1996, at which point it abruptly dropped off the rankings entirely. Forgotten in the wake of newer, shinier games, no doubt. Is this the fate of all games, no matter how great? And just for fun, I decided to check in on our old friends at Computer and Video Games magazine, and you know what? They loved it too. Their biggest complaint was that it was too similar to X-Wing. And I know oversaturation is bad, but when there's only one of a thing, I feel like making one more thing like it shouldn't be considered a problem. And if you remember my Privateer video, I know what you're thinking. Surely there couldn't be another British-made game that they pushed as being better than this one. And to that I say, do you even know who you're dealing with? I mean, hey, I'm not familiar with this game. Maybe it really is great. Potentially greater than TIE Fighter? I don't know, I'm not seeing it on the polls. I'm just going off a healthy dose of skepticism for anything these people have to say. I couldn't find any concrete sales numbers, but we do know that X-Wing sold at least somewhere in the ballpark of 500,000 copies, and given that TIE Fighter's influence and esteem far outstrips that of its predecessor, we can safely assume it sold significantly more, probably somewhere in the million-plus range. By the way, if you want a rough gauge of how the efforts to make the game more accessible and let players control the level of difficulty went, consider that Prima Games made major bank off the official strategy guide for X-Wing for obvious reasons. So, of course, they were expecting to do even better with the follow-up. And yet, according to mission designer David Westman, sales of the TIE Fighter strategy guide fell off so hard in comparison that Prima demanded their money back. Mission accomplished? So, TIE Fighter, huh? What can I even say except, what a game. In a funny way, it ends up proving both me and my detractors right about X-Wing. I was right to say that X-Wing had serious problems. The awkward learning curve, the obnoxiously vague objectives, the flagrant disregard for your time, the straight-up unfair mission design. All of these can be fixed without sacrificing any of what made it good in the first place, as proven by TIE Fighter. My detractors were right to say that energy management isn't just a gimmick. It's the foundation for a subgenre of space sims totally distinct from Wing Commander, and making games in that style is just as worthy a pursuit, as proven by TIE Fighter. Whenever somebody asks what order they should play a given series of games in, the right answer is pretty much always the order of release. But the X-Wing series is one of those rare exceptions where I think you're probably better off starting with TIE Fighter. Not just because it has a much smoother on-ramp, but because a player with TIE Fighter under their belt will be much better equipped, not only to deal with X-Wing's bullshit, but more crucially, to appreciate what it's going for. Wing Commander is the space sim interpreted through the lens of Top Gun. The key to survival is instinct. Skill, strategy, and teamwork are still essential, but they need to be honed to the point that they can be done by feel, like practicing for a sport. Because as the original Maverick says,
"You don't have time to think up there. If you think, you're dead."
In other words, it's space combat for jocks, characterized by intense, high-speed dogfights. X-Wing, by contrast, is space combat for nerds. The intensity isn't there, not with that docile enemy AI, but the danger still is, if you make the wrong move, or fail to make the necessary preparations. It's less a sport and more of an engineering discipline. While the depth of the system is still overstated by some, I have to admit that the skill ceiling is at least high enough that I didn't reach it. Going over my footage, there were plenty of times when my ship was far from optimally configured. Another thing I criticized X-Wing for was not really being the best fit for Star Wars, and, well, I still maintain that. Like, really? This Star Wars?
His computer's off. Luke, you switched off your targeting computer. What's wrong?
Nothing. I'm all right.
But on reflection, Wing Commander is just as off in the opposite direction. The fact that Origin went on to do Strike Commander makes a lot of sense. After finishing the X-Wing series, Totally Games would go on to make, among other things, a Star Trek game. And really, good on them, because I can't think of a more appropriate venue for this style of gameplay. I also overestimated how influential X-Wing was on the genre. Sure, practically every game Afterword had to have power management of some kind, but the vast majority were surface-level implementations, amounting to little more than setting a preference between defense, mobility, and power. Meaning, the X-Wing series is a lot more unique than I thought. If you want more of this kind of gameplay, all you've got is Bridge Commander, which might go too far in the engineering direction for your tastes, and maybe Independence War. If you're watching this video and you haven't played this game yet, go fix that. Despite its age, it's widely and rightly considered to be in the running for best of its kind, and it still holds up in all the ways that really matter, with options to account for some of those other ways if they matter to you. The most dated aspect is the control scheme, which might intimidate you, but keep in mind that unlike X-Wing, TIE Fighter is willing to meet you halfway, with tutorials and a genuinely helpful commanding officer who sets you up to succeed and gives you good advice when you don't. Not to mention, if you ever forget any of the controls, which happens to the best of us, you can press the K key at any time during gameplay to get a list of them, so all you need to remember is K for keyboard, and you can figure out the rest from there. But wait, you might say, haven't I just experienced the entire game vicariously through this video already? And that's a good point actually, but have you considered that there's a whole new game's worth of expansion content that you haven't seen yet? Ha! You won't get the better of me. Well, that's all I've got for you. Hope you enjoyed it. I'd like to extend a hearty thanks to my wonderful patrons who make these videos possible. I'd especially like to thank those of the major tier who get to have their names read out loud. Jomenthan, Red 1, Erica Simmons, A Hanging Chad, Microwell, Alarmed Response, Regular Casanova, Josh Cardwell, Justin Talbot, Julius BMT Coter, Jan Vollmer, and Puke Skywalker, formerly 410,757,864,530 gay cops. As voted on by patrons of Captain and Higher, my next big video like this one will be Wing Commander 3, so get ready for some FMV Mark Hamill. Notice I said the next big video. Now that I have some experience making smaller videos and a backlog of stream games to work with, I'd like to try to use those to put out at least one video a month. Imagine that. We'll see how it goes. Till next time, this is... You know, when I came up with the channel name, I never really thought about how I would actually refer to myself. I'm kinda partial to the name X-Wing forced me to use due to DOS file name limits. Space Cad. I like that. Like I'm Space Dandy's edgy rival or something. Anyway, this is Space Cad signing off.
You're not authorized in this area.